Good evening. Tonight. Welcome to tea time. And that means that what we're doing on this stream is that we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy XIV stuff. Maybe something not Final Fantasy XIV stuff. Reviewing some clips you sent me. And yeah, just having a good old time. So if there's anything you would like to talk about Final Fantasy XIV, something to discuss, maybe you have a question, this is a great place to ask. And if you're in the comments after the stream, you can also leave a question in the comment section if you like. I try to do my best to answer all the questions anyway, so don't you worry. Hey Kitsuneko, hey Angel, hey Udu, hey Rust, Gazel, Phil, and Fila. I hope you're all doing very well. And I hope you brought tea. Or if you don't like tea, maybe some other hot beverage that you like. But yeah, Caetsu asked what's the music in the intro. It is called Dreamwalker, and it is related to one of the tribes in Endwalker. By related, I mean it plays in their area. So if you just like blindly Google it and you haven't actually reached that point, then it might be a spoiler for you. So just keep that in mind. If you can somehow get it like spoiler free or like with just the music, then that helps a little bit. And in case you're wondering how I got the clip of Dreamwalk like that, typically with those like longer music clips, I find that it doesn't really work to just like either like put the song on like the actual song because it's like 3 or 4 minutes maybe, and just downloading someone else's like 30-minute take. Often those like start in the middle of the song, which like I put it on for a really long time potentially, so I'd rather have like, I would like the start as well. So what I do is I go and buy the song like in game, the orchestrion roll, and then I go over here and I just put it on. And the trick then is to like turn off all other sounds, so it's just the music, and then full blast, and then just record that for like half an hour. It's pretty smart, isn't it? I hope you enjoy what part of the stream you can, Kitsuneko. Gazel says, which healer do you play the most? I probably play Sage the most. Sometimes I play Scholar quite a bit, but it's usually Sage that I default to. Yeah. Recently, the jobs that I've been playing the most are actually Paladin, Sage, Black Mage, and Samurai. Pretty much, in case you're curious. Phil says it's too warm for hot beverages. Yeah, I would say that. I understand that. I recorded voice lines for like a good 2 or 3 hours with that door closed and the windows behind me closed, and by the time I was done, it was like at least 30 degrees. I have like a table thermometer here, but it's usually like saying like 10% more than what it actually is. So sometimes it's a little inaccurate. So I'm willing to like lowball it just to make sure I'm not lying. Hey Dragma, I hope you're doing well. Hey Wolf, I hope you're doing well as well. Dragma says, I'm learning to play with Sage. It's my first time with a healer. I'm still a Sprout. If you're finding it difficult to pick up Sage, I will say that it might be very overwhelming to start at level 70 with Sage. One thing you could do, if you're finding it very tough, but you specifically want to play Sage, is to just get acquainted with like the spells you have at level 18. So that would mean, well, you would have all of these because those are like permanently unlocked as long as the like you're getting scaled down below 48. It's like these 6, and then like these 5, and then Q for like Sastasha. like the starting dungeon, so that you can get acquainted with your toolkit there. Sage's toolkit is very boring in Sastasha, but it's more like the principle. Then, like, when you've got acquainted with that, you can, like, jump into Bravelock's Longstop. That's around level 34? I think it's 34. Yes, 34. And that would mean you would have Eucrasia as well. And that adds a lot. And Flemma, like, that adds these 3 buttons. And then you, when you feel comfortable with that, you could jump to, like, a level 50 dungeon. I'm saying level 50 dungeon because I'm like, I mean, Zemail Darkhold and Aurum Vale are really difficult. So, like, you might feel overwhelmed because of the dungeon and not because of the job. Many level 50 dungeons are easier than those 2. And that would then give you Soteria, Icarus, Driuholi, and Discrasia, and Keracholi. So, like, it would give you some buttons. Like, it would give you, like, the basic Adder Skull toolkit and an AoE attack. Like, my advice is generally, if you feel that it is a little overwhelming at level 70 because you're getting quite a lot of spells, go down in lower level content and, like, gradually introduce the toolkit for yourself. That tends to help. Part of the reason why a lot of healer mains might say that Sage is Lamau easy mode to pick up is because, well, let me put it like this. This is actually Whispering Dawn. This is actually Lustrate. And this is actually Sacred Soul. So basically what I'm getting at here is that if you already played Scholar up to level 70, then the majority of the Sage toolkit is like the same with like a different color of, like, different coat of paint. So like if you feel that Sage is a little overwhelming, don't worry about it. Bagma says, I thought Sage would be more difficult. I'm doing great, but when people get low, I start to freak out. That's normal. Barrier healers are better at dealing with, like, consistently keeping people up. Like, you're using your cooldowns gradually to make sure no one drops super low. So it's not surprising if you find it scary and stressful when people drop low, because barrier healers have a harder time dealing with that. Pure healers, on the other hand, are better suited to actually deal with such a situation. They, on the other hand, find it more difficult to casually, like, keep people topped up all the time. So, like, say, like, checks and balances, right? And Puppeteer says same thing here. As a person who doesn't play healer, I think Sage is pretty nice. Yeah. Angel says, hot beverages cool down your body. Wait, how does that work biologically? Is it like because the body doesn't have to wait, like, spend energy to keep you warm? Or because the body is tricked into believing that it is warmer than it actually is? You sweat more so you cool down. Oh, well, there you go. Interesting. Hey, Irika. I hope you're doing well. And hey, Gilano. And Ymir. And how about if we just call you Plus Ultra? Does that work? The name is so long, it just goes off the screen. How difficult is Reaper compared to Summoner, or... I'm guessing you mean Red Mage? Bob works. I'll try to remember Bob. Actually, let me just write it down. Asks, how difficult is Reaper compared to Summoner and Red Mage? I'm guessing you meant Red Mage with RMD. Summoner is, like, just no discussion, probably the easiest job in the game. It has a little bit of like, if we're talking someone who has no knowledge about Final Fantasy XIV, then Summoner, of course, has some learning curve in that you need to understand that you have to summon your pet. You need to understand this gauge here. You also need to understand this gauge here. Many of your buttons are like a light novel in terms of, like, text amount. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous, and many of your buttons don't actually explain what they do. Like, Gemshine doesn't explain what it even does. I mean, just do it like this. Gemshine doesn't explain what it even does. And that can make it really difficult to pick up, but once you understand the basics of Summoner, it is the easiest job in the game, like, to play. And I don't think that's something that I'm, like, subjective about. I'm pretty sure that everyone agrees that it is, like, the easiest job to play. Like, some players that main a specific job that is, like, on the easier side, or people that just main a specific job, like, religiously, might disagree and say, no, I don't actually understand how to play Summoner on account of having never tried it. But yeah, the reason why I'm starting with that explanation is simply because Reaper is considered the easiest melee DPS. But it is not, like, there's no contest. Like, if you're putting Reaper up against Summoner, Summoner wins. Like, there's no discussion. Like, it's not even close. But if you put Reaper up against most other DPS jobs, Reaper is considered easier. The thing is that Reaper, the reason why Reaper is a lot harder than Summoner, relatively speaking, is because Reaper has two distinctly different openers. Summoner also has two distinctly different openers, but Summoner's opener is dictated largely by, one, does your group actually coordinate raid buffs, and two, how many short duration raid buffs do you have? Which means that you don't, like, you just need to understand what jobs you're looking for. Reaper can optimize which opener it uses depending on what boss fight it is. And Summoner is functional at pretty much any spell speed, but Reaper is like, it gets awkward if you have, like, anything, like, if you're trying to optimize and you have anything faster than 2.48 of a GCD, then it starts getting awkward. By the way, I don't have 2.48, so probably part of the reason why I'm playing Reaper less. Exactly, Angel. It's early Shroud versus early Gluttony. The reason why it becomes a little bit of a problem is because early Gluttony is the more flexible opener. That one is workable with a fast GCD. Early Shroud is not flexible. It is not usable if you don't have the right GCD. But early Shroud is better on more fights. Like, if you're trying to optimize. The key thing here is if you're trying to optimize. If you're not playing like Savage or not like passing or anything like that, then Reaper is actually really easy. Like, if you're not trying to be perfect, then Reaper's average to high performance is very easy to attain, in my opinion. The double enshroud tricks you can perform are pretty straightforward. So it's not that bad. Red Mage, on the other hand, have, like, just to put a bow on that, Red Mage, this average performance is a lot more dictated by whether you can use these two buttons on cooldown. Like, doing Red Mage just fine is okay, but a massive amount of your damage is actually, like, over the course of a fight, is dictated by whether you know how to align your GCDs and do GCD displacement. I talk a little bit about this in my Red Mage guide. Making use of swift cast acceleration and clever timing of your melee combos to make sure that Flesh and Contra 6 come out on cooldown every single time over the course of a fight. Like, let me put it like this. If Dawn Trail comes out on the next expansion and Contra 6 and Flesh gets an extra charge, then Red Mage might actually circle back around and become, like, almost as easy to play as Summoner. Maybe. Simply because those two account for a massive amount of the difficulty inherent in optimizing Red Mage. Now, the key thing here I'm saying is optimizing Red Mage. Playing Red Mage, like playing the job, does not require you to do that perfectly. It does not require you to do it perfectly. It doesn't even require you to do it well. It's like, you'll get there. But basically, I would say of Summoner, Reaper, and Red Mage, just on the particular question, Summoner is like in a completely different league in terms of ease of use. Like it's completely off. Like if there was a scale, then like Summoner, like of difficulties, like higher difficulty jobs would like be higher up, then Summoner would be like not on the list. Like it would just be so far down once you've learned the basics. Like that's the key thing. Summoner has a pretty steep like first like impressions of the job, and then it like gets easier from there. Leveling Summoner is also really awkward because you will like at lower levels you genuinely have to like weave auto attacks into your rotation. Not weave as in using them, but like you have to like go up to the enemy and smack them with your book, which is really counterintuitive given that spells do not activate your auto attack. So you actually have to like right click the thing to do that, which is really awkward. But that is what makes the job work at lower level. It's really, really weird. Let's see. Hey Taylor, hope you're doing well. Yeah, in conclusion, Reaper is very easy to pick up. Very, very easy to pick up. But as you like reach like the higher echelons of skill level with the job, Reaper becomes very difficult to optimize. Red Mage also becomes very difficult to optimize. Summoner, not so. Bob also asked, I realized my Red Mage has a 2.4 recast. Is that too much? It's very fast for Red Mage, but if you're playing Savage content, you would probably rather have have a slower one. Like you want something like 248, 249 is very nice for Red Mage. But if you're not playing Savage, you're not aiming to like be the best, then don't worry about it. Like don't worry about it. It's fine. 2.4 is fine. The advantage of having spell speed is also that then that means that you have like you have to stand still and cast for less, so you can more easily like sneak in and attack every now and then. And it also just means that you have a little bit extra mana to work with, which might be nice since mana, like your melee combo is your most mobile phase of your rotation. So it's not so bad. Emir says you could just be like me and jump headfirst in. Summoner lends itself really well to that. It just has the disadvantage that I feel like a lot of players play Summoner like that. Like, because many of the actions don't explain themselves very well, I've met a lot of Summoners that have no idea exactly what their buttons do, so they play the job in a very weird way because they don't actually understand what difference it makes. Or never considered what difference it makes, even. And part of the problem is that it's easier to pick Summoner up if you just put on like a blindfold and just go for it, in terms of like blindfold in respect to the tooltips and just go for it. But at the same time, it also leads to a lot of misunderstandings. Zagnalfine says, I personally think Sage is hard. And there you go. Some people find it hard, some people find it very easy. Fila says, I would like to ask, the ranged attack on tanks such as Shield Lob, if we use those, will we get to hold aggro, or can the DPS still overtake it? Let me just double check something. So, I tested this a long time ago. But basically, Tomahawk and Shield Lob have a 7 times potency multiplier on them. Enmity potency multiplier, sorry. On Mend, and Lightning Shot has a 5 times multiplier on them. What that means is that when you Shield Lob something, it's like, in terms of raw potency, it hits just as hard as Blade of Faith in terms of enmity potency. So, if you use Blade of Faith on something, or you use Shield Lob, the enmity generated is going to be the same. The reason why my tank guide advises that if there's like 3 or 4 enemies, you can use like your ranged attack and taunt to pull them is specifically because of that. You could run up to the enemies and use total eclipse. You've done 100 potency worth of enmity. If you shield lob, provoke, shield lob, you've done 700 at least to each of them. With the same GCDs, you wouldn't be able to use a total eclipse instead of the first shield lob, because the first shield lob you use before you're in melee range. So that means you would get 2 total eclipses. That's 200 potency of enmity on each of the enemies. Or, well, you would get total eclipse and prominence, so that's 270. But that's still like close to a third of what you would get with shield lob. To add to that, a common misconception with provoke is that it only generates 1 point of enmity on top of putting you on top. Provoke does at least 4,000 enmity potency nowadays, based on testing I did. It used to be 2,000 in Shadowbringers, but it seems like it might be more than twice that now. So, let me just put it like this. 5 of these... Sorry, you can't see the potencies. 5 of these, or provoke. It's the same in terms of enmity. So that's why I recommend doing that. If there's more than 4 enemies, then it starts getting awkward. You might just want to AoE, like 2 AoE attacks, and just move on with it. The reason why I do it that way is because, like, the 4th mob, I can just keep running and do shield mobs. I don't have to stay. Like, I will pass through the mobs by after 1 GCD or so. It's like Nalfine says, I main white mage. Yeah, if you main a pure healer, then it might be very difficult to do like the mental switch to a barrier healer, because you have to play those 2 like types of healers completely differently. The key reason being that barrier healers are more about sustained healing, and pure healers are more like burst healing, which is very ironic considering that it's the pure healers that are supposed to have the regen buttons, right? And you know what, Phil? You know what a really funny thing about that 30 Yalm thing? Only the high-level version of Physis got that upgrade. The low-level one is still 15 Yalms. I don't know if it's an oversight, if it's intentional, but I feel like they forgot something. And Wolf says, as a healer main, Sage is the only class I struggle with despite maining Scholar and Astrologian for healing. Maybe it's like a matter of like taking a different perspective on it. Sage is very similar to Scholar in how they work, I think. As you may know, I have guides on the job, so maybe that helps. I also have like shorts for each of the healers that demonstrate how you can play them consistently, pretty much regardless of what your tank is or how your tank plays. You could check that one, see if that inspires you. I'm a little bit behind, I see. There's a lot of conversation. Zila says there's a difference between having 15 seconds because of a second charge and doing ASAP, even if it's both of Sunflower. Wait, what was that about? They do have auto attacks. They just do like 100 damage tops. I mean, 124, yeah. I'm just going to demonstrate something real quick. Oh right, the flesh thing. Right, thank you, Antila. It is true. And part of the awkwardness with so if Flesh and Contra Sixt got an extra charge, what would probably happen is that you would try to align them with raid buffs. I think that would probably be what happens. So remember, 124 at level 90, remember that? Well, that was a direct hit. That, I'm pretty sure, was also a direct hit. That was a crit. 74. So around 74. So from level 60 to 90, you get like around around 66% more auto attack damage, and 11 times more HP, right? Yeah, we were talking about book max damage. Like, the reason why auto attacks are so super important, specifically at lower levels, is because your auto attack damage actually scales extremely badly. But it starts really good, so it takes a really long time for your auto attacks to stop being relevant. In fact, if you do auto attack from the start to finish in a level 90 fight, you will do more damage than if you didn't, even though it's like the difference of like 1 or 2 spells. It will make a difference. Ymir says, I have a selfish question. Go ahead. What is the question? The current biz for summoners is like the current biz for red mages is like 248 GCD, and that is very convenient because it's something like that for summoners as well. Part of the reason for red mages doing that is because, well, 249 is actually really cheap. The reason is that, so I talked about this in my speed video, like my speed guide, that you already wrote it. I don't know if I can. What was the question? Was it higher up? I can't see it. But the reason is that the first GCD reduction from speed is like really cheap. I talked about that in the speed video, that basically you get a GCD reduction for every third increment of speed. You know how that, like, the stats are like breakpoints. You need a certain amount to get a breakpoint. It's not just like a perfect like linear scaling. You need a certain amount. So speed actually gives like damage over time bonuses on every increment, but it only gives a GCD reduction on every third. I had actually planned to take your clip first, Ymir. I just haven't gotten to it yet, but I had actually planned yours first. But because it's every third increment, generally speed isn't super great if you don't need a lot of it, but the first GCD reduction is actually on the first increment. So like the first, like the jump from 2.5 to 249 is super cheap. Like, it's really free. So if you've ever seen a job be like, yeah, this job hates speed, by the way, get 249, that's why. Like, that's the reason, is that the first increment is like, it's very, very cheap to get. I don't know why you go for 2, but I'm guessing it has something to do with, I believe the reason for red mage is that the raid, so the savage raid ring is good, like that's fine, but the tombstone ring is spell speed, like there's spell speed on it, and because the tombstone ring is spell speed, it means that your choices for rings is, for 660 it's the savage raid ring and the tombstone ring, which you don't want because there's speed on it. Then you can, for 650, you can choose the tombstone ring, which there's speed on it, so you don't want that. Or you can choose the 640 crafted ring, but there's speed on that too, so you can see where I'm going with this. I believe the 640 normal raid ring does not have speed on it, but it also doesn't have crit on it, so you don't want that either. So the reason is that the 660 tombstone ring is not bad. It's just not best. It's just not perfect, but it's not bad. I think that's the reason. Stephanie says, I just want to thank you for all your great content. You really helped me enjoy the game a lot more. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And thank you, Wolf, for the +1 on that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Let's see. Oh, by the way, Dragmore said you should make a video of your favorite job for each type. I've actually done that multiple times in a way without ever labeling it like that. So I said the jobs that I play the most right now is Paladin, Sage, Black Mage, and Samurai. That is weird because it used to be Warrior, Sage, Summoner, and Reaper, and maybe a little bit of Dancer. And the reason why I say that is because I have a video where that is like 5 easy jobs to play if you don't want to think too hard, where I outline how to play Summoner, Dancer, Reaper, Warrior, and Sage. So I've technically actually made the video. It's just that, let's say, some guy on the internet who wears a lot of pink on his character, his favorite 5 jobs to play might not be super interesting for a lot of people, whereas selling it as something that might be helpful for you might be more interesting. There's also the part that my favorite jobs change on a dime. Like, I'm pretty sure someone asked me last week, or maybe a week before that, what my favorite jobs are, and I'm pretty sure I answered the question differently. And I will not be surprised if there's someone in the chat who's that person. Also, thank you, Irika. I'm glad my guides helped you. Let's see. Little Billy's movie says, Paladin is the only job that really keeps me conscious about auto attacks. Even Monk, which technically boosts them every 90 seconds. That's true. The reason that it is like that is because there's a few funny things with specifically crit and auto attacks. Those are 2 passive things that happen over the course of a fight. The reason why they're interesting in this specific respect and how they're interesting together is because there is... Let me think for a moment. There is one job in the game that interacts with auto attacks in a way that isn't just damage bigger. The job that I'm referring to when I'm saying damage bigger is of course Monk, because technically Monk doesn't interact with their auto attack. They just have a button that makes them do more auto attacks. They don't actually care about the auto attacks very much, but they have a button that makes them auto attack more. The only job that actually interacts with auto attacks is Paladin, and the reason being that I believe it's this one. You get 5 oath gauge each time an auto attack lands. Now, the really fascinating thing about that is, and I can't remember which video I talked about that in. I think it was like one of the 10 mechanics ones. Let me just grab a different job just to underline my point. That's not a good one. That's actually a really great one. So, the delay on your weapon. You can see Majestic Mandeville Bayonet here has a physical damage value and an auto attack value and a delay value. So the physical damage is what decides all the damage you do. The delay decides how long there is between your auto attacks. And it is quite literal. If you've played WoW, you know weapons have like a swing speed. It's that. And it's literally that. So this Gunbreaker weapon swings every 2.8 seconds. Every 2.8 seconds. The auto attack value is literally just a multiplier that makes it so that your auto attack is proportional to all other jobs. I believe it was like I calculated in the specific video, but the thing is that if you divide 143.36 by 3.36, it should give the same number as dividing 119.46 with 2.8. Now, the reason why that is interesting is because 2.8 is a very, very nice and clean number. However, 2.24 is not, and Paladin is the only job where it would actually matter that your auto-attack timers kinda neat. What this means is that Warrior's short cooldown has a 25-second cooldown, Dark Knight's short cooldown has a 15-second cooldown, Gunbreaker's short cooldown has a 25-second cooldown, and Paladin's short cooldown has a 22.4-second cooldown. Because you need to auto-attack 10 times. And 22.4 is a very nice number, of course. That's pretty funny. And the thing with crit is that similarly there's only one job that actually interacts with crit, and that's because they generate a chakra every time they do critical damage. The funny thing with that is that Bard used to have an interaction with crit. It was removed. I believe I heard this story I got told from Bard mains is that before, when it actually scaled with crit, back in Stormblood, the way that it worked is that your dots, so these two, if the damage from the dots did critical damage, so they randomly can crit, just like your auto attacks and all your other attacks, if they do crits, they did the repertoire thing. So the one that has an 80% chance of happening every 3 seconds now. So that meant if you had no gear, you had a 5% crit chance, which meant that you had a 5% chance for repertoire to happen per dot, notably, because they could crit individually. But 5% is kind of bad, right? At the end of an expansion, like in Endwalker, if you have full best in slot gear right now, you have around 28% crit chance, I'm pretty sure. I think it's 28. Which would mean they had a 28% chance to activate. Which is way better, but just to underline this, at the start of a raid tier, your chance for your core mechanic to even work was 5%. Maybe 8, maybe 10. At the end of an expansion, it was close to 30. What happened is that Bard, like, if you just, like, if the dev team just, like, balanced Bard at the start of the expansion, and just left them in an okay spot, then by the final raid tier, Bards would be like the top DPS. Like, they would beat everyone else because their crit would make, like, their crit procs would, like, if they're balanced around having a low crit value, then if they have a high one, they're completely busted. And that's why in Shadowbringers, they reworked them so your low-level dots had a 20% chance, and your high-level dots had a 40% chance. Which still made sure that you got to feel how it felt for your proc chance to kinda suck, even though it was pretty good. Yeah, I don't know for sure, Bevel. All I know is the stories I've been told, and I heard that the reason why they reworked Bard in this way, specific way where they removed crit as a factor in this way, was just because they scale too good with crit. I'm just saying, you know, all jobs scale incredibly well with crit. Just imagine having a job that scales even better with crit. That's not good for balance. See, Ross said... Same for me about jobs. It's like, now I want to play this job, and in a couple of weeks, I don't want to play this, I'd like to play another job. A funny story with that is I'm a tank main, apparently, given my gear. So I have all of the tombstone gear. There's just a little problem. I don't like to play warrior with skill speed anymore, and I don't like to play paladin with skill speed. I actually also prefer playing Gunbreaker without skill speed. I'm quite indifferent to skill speed on Dark Knight, but I'll accept it on Gunbreaker. The reason why that's a problem is because the Tombstone gear has 2 mandatory skill speed pieces. You might notice that I don't have any skill speed on my paladin for a reason. I basically got those pieces, like I bought them I waited as long as possible with buying them, so I just sat on like a huge amount of tomestones and just didn't buy them because I didn't want them. Got them, equipped them, played a bit, and then I didn't play tank for a week. Because I like playing Paladin and Warrior more than I like playing Dark Knight and Gunbreaker. And every time I like wanted to do a dungeon, I would like, maybe if I was a warrior, I'd go in and like, my cooldowns aren't lining up right. It's just not the same. And then I wouldn't play warrior for a few days, just because of that. So the solution was, ding, no skill speed. It's not even too much skill speed, Bevel. It's literally any skill speed that was the problem. You can see here, if I put on those pieces, I have a 244 GCD, whereas on Warrior and Paladin, I have nothing. Because those two pieces give 0.06. So I just don't want any. The reason this happens, I talk a little bit about this in my speed guide. It is the OGCD alignment problem. So if you have a GCD of 2.40 on a Gunbreaker, if you early weave Blasting Zone, and just for anyone that isn't sure what that means, an early weave looks like this, and a late weave looks like this. If you early weave Blasting Zone, then 30 seconds later, Blasting Zone will be available as a late weave, not an early weave, a late weave. If your GCD is 2.40, you can like calculate it out to see that I'm right. I think I also showcased it in one of my videos. If your GCD is 2.50, then 30 seconds later, after you use Blasting Zone, if you early weave Blasting Zone, then 30 seconds later, Blasting Zone will be an early weave again. In fact, if you click the button exactly 1 second after the GCD, then Blasting Zone will be available again exactly 1 second after the GCD, assuming you didn't clip anything on the way. And it's just more predictable. It feels nice to have it like that. That's the reason. Zach Nalfine said, my wife asked, oh yeah, that was that stream, right? Do you make raid guides too? Just for anyone curious, I haven't made raid guides. The reason why I don't make raid guides is mainly because, well, I'm not a Savage Raider. I don't have a static to Savage Raid with. So by the time I would have like a raid fight, like a boss fight down and know how to do it, to a point where I could make a guide, there would already be like 5+ other guides, and the party finder meta would already have decided which one they're doing. So there's not really any reason to do that. Like I have considered making like dungeon guides and like guides for casual content, because some people might like that, but I wanted to, like the perspective I'm thinking on that is like, for example, instead of making a guide on just an example, instead of making a guide on Sastasha, where I'm like, this is how you do the dungeon, because basically no one needs to know how to do Sastasha, I think it would be more like, no one needs a guide to do Sastasha. I think the more interesting thing would be to like, how do you do Sastasha the most effective way possible? Like, who's the best tank to do it? Who's the best healer to do it? Who's the best DPS to do it? By the way, remember to click the parchment at the start. Use it like this. How do you speed run the dungeon, basically? Like, I think that would be interesting. And that could then also pivot into, like, making dungeon guides when the content starts getting more difficult at higher level. But I don't know if people are interested in that. And right now I'm making other videos, right? But that's the main reason why I don't make raid guides, is because by the time I'm ready to make one, other people have already made them. And I don't know if there's any, like, interest me making them. Also, hey Greensville, did you enjoy Armored Core? And yeah, the thing is, Rust, and for any other sprouts in the chat, this stat stuff discussion, don't worry about it. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to, like, usually item level is what matters the most when you're leveling. There are some weird gear pieces you can get on your way to max level. But for the most part, just item level. And trying random gear with weird skill speed amounts or spell speed amounts will actually make you understand it better by trying it. It's like, you will learn, you will understand that Dragoon doesn't like speed that much simply because the idle share gear at level 60 gives you like a GCD of 2.3 for some reason, and you will find that it feels really weird, right? So you will learn that, and the best way to learn it is to like try it. That's also why, like, some people say they watch my job guides by like watching a bit, pausing, trying themselves, like seeing if they can do it, and then watching some more. Maybe they even watch the whole thing, see if they remember it all, and then maybe watch the guide again. Like, that is a much better way to go about it than just watching the guide and going like, well, I'm sure I'll remember this when I do a dungeon in 5 hours. Like, it's much more likely to stick if you actually tried and practiced a little bit. It is really weird, Bevel. It's skill speed and spell speed are just really awkward stats in this game. I don't know how it came to this, but I'm just saying it wasn't any less weird in Stormblood when I started. Wolf, you can ask the question. I'm pretty sure the thumbnail on this stream says Q&A. I'm pretty sure, so you can ask your question. If you just like maybe like put like a number next to your message so I know that it's parts, then I know to like wait a little bit. Gazel says anyone would put spell speed on Dark Knight. Spell speed actually. First, do not put spell speed on your Dark Knight. No. Put that spell speed materia away. Don't do it. Put it down. Good. Now, Dark Knight actually has 3 things that scale with spell speed: Unmend, Unleash, and Stalwart Soul. There's just the unfortunate reality that it's not good. Like, it doesn't help you. It doesn't help enough. And if you needed to burst AoE, you would use Caetsu anyway. So there's no reason to get spell speed. But technically, you could put spell speed on Dark Knight. You could technically also put spell speed on Paladin. Don't do it. Don't do it. But you could. Don't do it, but you could. Do you get what I'm saying? Are you smelling what I'm putting down here? Don't put spell speed on your tanks. Even if it would do something, don't do it. The reason why is because, as I said, Dark Knight gets an extremely pathetic amount of damage gain from putting spell speed on their gear. And Paladin technically gets like a minuscule amount of like single target DPS from it, because you're going to use Holy Spirit every now and then. But what Paladin really cares about here the most is how much burst damage you can do. That's also part of the reason why really ironic change, because Paladin used to be a sustained DPS. But what Paladin cares about is how many GCDs they can put in fight or flight. That's what they care about. And well, you need like a GCD of 245 to consistently be like, well, 247 is like the minimum to fit an extra GCD in your fight or flight. And that is of course based on the fact that that is how Gunbreaker works. But that would mean that you have a GCD of 247 both on your weapon skills and your spells, which means that you're like double dipping. You have to invest twice as many stats to make this work compared to a Gunbreaker, for example. Or alternatively, the reason why you have to do it for both is because your burst has 5 spells, typically, sometimes 6. So if if you only get like GCD reduction on your on your weapon skills, you would need like a GCD of 2.3 or something to make that work. And the reason why Paladin doesn't care about that is because the weapon skill you would get additionally in your fight or flight would be like an atonement at best, or a fast blade at worst. Like it's like just an extra filler. You don't really need it. You don't really care about it that much, right? Like that's part of the reason why Paladin doesn't like speed. But what I was saying about how the fact that speed has always been awkward is in Stormblood, when I started, so I looked into guides, like when I started playing the game to try and understand, and I played Red Mage, and my favorite stat in games is speed. Like, look, I played Blood Death Knight in World of Warcraft because it was the tank that scaled incredibly well with haste. I played Brewmaster with the highest haste build that worked and was good. Like, anything I play in World of Warcraft, like retail World of Warcraft, I haven't played in years, but when I did, it was like, can I put haste on it? So if I'm saying speed is bad, it's me saying it like with a heavy heart that I went, I tested, I tried, speed is bad. Like, there's no defense. Speed is bad. It's just bad. And in Stormblood, the way that you calculated the value of speed was how many GZDs over the course of a fight does that give you, and what are those GZDs? So that means if you having a GZD of 249 means that you can sneak in 2 extra GZDs over the course of a fight. What those GZDs are going to be is what matters. So like 10 minutes down the line, what are the 2 final GZDs you get? Those are technically the GZDs you're getting. So if it was Fast Blade and Riot Blade on Paladin, for example, you would be like, don't really care about that. But if it meant that, for example, with Warrior, that you would get an extra Storm's Path that led into an extra Fell Cleave, that would be a bit better, right? But it would be fight specific, because there's like downtime that could play into it and all those things. So it's very complicated to calculate whether it's actually good. And nowadays, it's just usually not good, unfortunately. Ross says, I just apply crit materia for my tombstone gear and wear it for like 6 or 7 levels. You can wear it for 10 levels. Like, if you find high item gear, that's good, but yeah. Little Billy's movie says, do you think 7.0 or another future potential expansion could unify spell speed and skill speed into a single universal haste stat? I think it could happen in a minor patch, like Yoshi P tomorrow. Like, actually, why didn't you do it today? Like, next week, I don't know why they're split. I do not know why they're split. There's no reason for them to be split. The only jobs it actually even matters for is Warrior, no, not Warrior, Paladin, Dark Knight, and Red Mage. And for Red Mage, it doesn't really matter. Because, as far as I remember, the GZD on your enchanted weapon skills is fixed. I'm pretty sure. Might work on Reprise, but I'm pretty sure the 1-2-3 combo is unaffected. So the only GZDs that Red Mage would be affected on skill speed are those you don't use. So I don't know why they're split. There's no reason for them to be split. They could just unify them. I don't know if it's like spaghetti code or whatever it is, but it like, I don't see a reason why they're split. So I don't see why it would have to be like in a future expansion when it could be a minor patch potentially. Phil says, I'm not sure if there's a lot of people doing guides for non-savage dungeons right now. There are. If you ever heard about Azurite, it's also a channel. They started by making a guide on Tower of Zod when it was new. I think that's the core issue here, when it's new. I'm pretty sure that the MTQ Capture also makes guides on non-savage stuff. Dritharian, don't do it, but you could, don't do it. Exactly. Fel says you could maximize enhanced unmanned with spell speed on Dark Knight. That's like one whole extra plunge per 15 unmends. 50 GCDs. Yeah, well, it's one extra plunge for every 6 GCDs. Every 6 GCDs you get an extra plunge. Now the problem is that plunge isn't that good, and unmanned is not good damage-wise, so you wouldn't want that. Like, it doesn't pay for itself very well. Little Bailey's movie said, I thought of the haste thing recently because it does apparently exist in very niche pieces like the Boja achievement earrings or the Eureka accessories. That's true. I don't know if MTQ Capture is on hiatus. I don't watch a lot of other Final Fantasy XIV channels, but I know that it's like, if you're like looking for like a video that goes over the mechanics in a boss fight, it's almost always MTQ Capture or like Mr. Happy sometimes. Like one of the two, I think. If you're ever curious how a job used to work, like years ago, Mr. Happy has like a Realm Reborn and Heavensward job guides for a lot of jobs. It's like, you could do that as well. Like, those are actually really nice. You can see that they're very dated, but obviously they are. So Wolf said, my Dragoon melee DPS question is about how sometimes you can't follow your cooldowns because you're dodging mechanics or the boss forces your way for a time, so Dragoon's rotation doesn't always line up with cooldowns. Like Litany might come up during your Heaven's Thrust combo and all the raid cooldowns are going off, but I haven't gotten to Lance Charter Chaos Thrust line yet. Because you had a mechanic to dodge, so things will come up at odd times. I'm just not sure what best practice is. Am I supposed to just use Litany because everyone else is burning raid cooldowns? Same with Dragoon's other OGCDs like High Jump, Guys Google, Fire Dive. Should I be lining them up strictly with rotation, even if I've just had to play my rotation and I should have others coming up? So, two things. The first one is Dragoon is a little different from other jobs in terms of its GCDs and its OGCDs. You will use Lance Charge on cooldown. You will use Dragon Sight on cooldown. You will use Battle Litany on cooldown. You'll also use you will use Spine Shatter Dive during Battle Litany and Dragon Sight because you can charge 2 of them. You'll do the same with Dragonfire Dive. High Jump you will use on cooldown. Guys Google you will use on cooldown. Life Surge you will typically use on either 1 Heaven's Thrust, 2 Lance Charge improved Step 5 combos and not Step 4, Step 5 because they get an extra 100 potency. That's pretty much like the deviation. Like Life Surge is getting used on Heaven Thrust. There's some optimization that if you can't, like, because the length of your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 combos, you will not be able to fit 2 Heaven's Thrusts in Lance Charge. Like that's just not happening. So if you have 2 Life Surges, which you will have in your 2-minute burst, then you will typically have Heaven's Thrust and a Step 5. It's like the Step 5 that follows after, typically, with Life Surge. But the thing is, you're almost certain to have a Heaven's Thrust in your Lance Charge, regardless of where you are in your rotation. So you're supposed to use all of your OGCDs when they come up, and then the dice will just fall on where you are on your GCD. You don't have to wait to just before Chaotic Spring to use Lance Charge again. That's why if you check my high-level Dragoon guide, I'm pretty sure that I basically, like, when I talk about the 2-minute burst, I'm pretty sure I just, like, fade out all of the GCDs. Because it doesn't matter what the GCDs are. The only thing that matters is now you use Lance Charge and Dragon Sight. Now you use Battle Litany and maybe a Spine Shadow Dive. And now you use Geistgugul and Jump. Or whatever it is. Like, I can't actually remember the exact order. And speaking of the order, there's a lot of flexibility in the order. You want your damage buffs up. So Lance Charge and Dragon Sight preferably together because they have the same duration. And then Battle Litany, 1 GCD after that, typically. You want Geistgugul before Jump, but Mirage Dive, and you want Geistgugul before Jump and Mirage Dive, but Mirage Dive gives you like a buff for, is it like, I think it's 15 seconds, isn't it? I'm pretty sure it's 15 seconds. Oh, no, is it? It doesn't say on the tooltip. Oh, it says on this tooltip, of course. 15 seconds. So you have like 6 GCDs to find an opportunity to use Mirage Dive. No rush. Yeah, okay, so basically just use it as it comes off, even if your main 5-step combo is in a weird delay. Exactly. Your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 combos here, like your 5-step combos, are like... so if you've ever heard someone describe doing a DPS rotation in a boss fight as like spinning a plate while doing like riding something, or like doing 2 different things, Dragoon's rotation is basically that. You're doing your 5-step combos, and around those 5-step combos, you're just doing everything else. Like, the 5-step combos is just like, just like keeping that disc rolling, like that disc spinning, like on that stick, because everyone knows that it's so easy to like spin a plate on a stick. And then all the other stuff is whatever else you're doing, and they're just completely separate. Like completely separate. Like a particular thing that I've said that I would like to see on Dragoon in 7.0 is I would like to see that the Dragoon's GCDs and their OGCDs get a little bit more connected, like they make more sense together, right? Bell says, I hear a lot of people say Dragoon is the easiest melee outside of Reaper, but I find it to be the most complex. I think there's a very, very good answer to that, Phil. Dragoon mains will absolutely tell you that Dragoon is the easiest melee DPS, aside from Reaper, because they find it easy. Ninja mains will tell you the same thing about Ninja. Ironically, in my experience, Samurai non-mains, so people that are not maining Samurai, will say that Samurai is about as easy as Reaper. Because at face value, Samurai appears to be extremely easy. The problem is, and this is something that I'm a future video, by the way, any job that doesn't have a cooldown like this, you see 20 seconds of extra damage, or like this, 20 seconds extra damage, it's very easy if you're not like a Savage Raider or like someone that looks into these things to go, well, Samurai doesn't have a damage buff, so I can just like blindly click my cooldowns whenever. It's not very important when I apply Higanbana, is it? I just apply it whenever. I just spend my cooldowns when I have time for it. It's fine. It's fine. Meanwhile, if you're in a perfectly optimized group to actually optimize the damage of you, you have a 15-second window where you're doing over 40% more damage. I believe a video I made over a year ago, I actually outlined it to be about if you have every single, like if you're a Samurai and every single other person in your raid team is there to boost you, so your Astrologian will only play melee cards on you, and your Dancers, of course, close position with you. And so on and so forth. I believe you can get over 70% average DPS gain for 15 seconds, of course. 70%. Now that fight or flight 25% damage sounds kinda right? I think the 70% might include your personal damage buffs. It might be a little bit less, but even so, 60% more damage in a 15-second window, and it's stuff you have no control over. You have no control over this. So that means that if you're playing Samurai casually, Samurai is incredibly easy, because you don't need to worry about all these things. Relatively speaking, it's incredibly easy. It's not that easy. It has a lot of buttons and all that, but it's incredibly easy from a casual perspective. But when you start optimizing, you have this very strict looping rotation and some optimization tricks you can perform where you don't even have to use Hagakure and stuff like that. So it's a lot more complex than it looks. So what I'm getting at here is that Dragoon, Samurai, Monk, and Ninja are like 4 very different flavors of difficult. So it depends who you ask what is harder. Personally, I feel that Dragoon is actually the hardest of the 5 recently. But that is probably because I've played Monk more recently than Dragoon. Do you get what I mean? Weirdly, the guy that has played more Monk than Dragoon finds Monk easier to play than Dragoon? Strange, is it not? So I hope that makes sense. Angel also said, as far as I know, you don't want second Spine Shatter on 2 minutes since it's already overloaded with OGSTs. I think the answer is that it depends. I think you can fit it, because I've looked at it, like back when I made the guide. I know that I didn't discover that it couldn't fit. I discovered that it could fit. But an argument you could make for not stockpiling 2 Spine Shatter dives for your 2-minute burst is that it is only 250 potency, and your 2-minute burst is already pretty tight. Like, it's already pretty tightly filled with stuff. You don't really need that extra button. So if you can find any reason whatsoever to use Spine Shatter Dive for mobility, you could use one of them for that. Especially during your odd minute burst, like where you still have lance charge. I think that might be an argument. Let's see. Wolf said, Dragoon is my first real attempt at trying to master a DPS role. I spent so much time healing and tanking. Dragoon has been a huge learning curve. In that case, something you might want to consider as well, something you might stumble upon as you practice more, is an even more complicated question. And this is nearly impossible to answer straight. But the question is going to be, what do I do if my OGCDs, like, drift away from each other? So, drifting is typically referring to what is an easy example to demonstrate that. I think actually Warrior is pretty good. No, wait, maybe not. Gunbreaker is pretty good. So I'm just going to do like a very basic amount of rotation just to demonstrate what I'm talking about. So I will use No Mercy right now as a late weave, and then I do my Gnashing Fang combo. All the other stuff doesn't matter for this demonstration, so I will not use it. And I'll just do 1, 2, 3 combos. So drifting is basically the concept of if you don't get to use a cooldown, so it just sits there ready, then it drifts out of the point where you actually want to use it. Like if you want to use it on cooldown, like if it has a 30-second cooldown, you want to use it every 30 seconds so that it lines up with 2-minute cooldowns on 2 minutes. So now here, Gnashing Fang is drifting. It's just drifting and drifting and drifting. So when is that a problem? Now it's a problem. I think it might be a problem. It's just on the cusp of being a problem. The reason is, I'm going to use No Mercy as soon as I can. Okay? I'm going to use it as soon as I can. Now 20 seconds, but Gnashing Fang is ready in 10. So now I can use it. It just barely still fits inside No Mercy. If it had drifted like 10 extra seconds, then I would have to make a choice. And this is the difficult question. Do I not use Gnashing Fang for up to 30 seconds to make sure that it lands within No Mercy? This guarantees that I lose out on a use of Gnashing Fang 100% of the time. But it also means that every second Gnashing Fang for the remainder of the fight is going to land in No Mercy, and every fourth Gnashing Fang is going to land in raid buffs, assuming there are any, and they still line up together. If we just focus on the No Mercy part, then skipping a Gnashing Fang to realign it in this way means that you lose out on 100% of a Gnashing Fang combo. Using Gnashing Fang in No Mercy means that you get 120% of a Gnashing Fang combo, which means that you're sacrificing 100% to gain 20%. So if you're alone and you just have yourself to depend on, the question becomes, will this be worth it? It will take 5 minutes for this to have been worth it, because No Mercy only is 20%, it's not 50%. But if there's raid buffs, as I said, like 60% more damage on the Samurai, it could be that if you use it with No Mercy and all the raid buffs, we might actually be looking at like 60% if you can get Gnashing Fang to line up with raid buffs just once. So it will maybe take 2 or 3 minutes for it to have been worth it. But the problem is calculating that in real time in a boss fight, and there's usually a reason why you drifted. It's probably because you're a little confused or something. I'm sorry, you haven't been able to read the tooltip all this time. You're going to be a little confused and maybe a little bit stressed, so you don't have time to calculate whether this is worth it. The short answer to this is using your cooldowns on cooldown and keeping them on cooldown spinning is almost always better, because of that detail where it might take several minutes for it to have been worth it. That is typically the answer, is that it's just better to just click your cooldowns when you have them. Like, you try to make them line up perfectly in the opener. If things start to like drift apart, then unless you know that there's a reason to do it that makes it good in that specific fight, it's usually better to just click them in cooldown. But if it's casual content, just on the subject, if it's casual content, it's not like anyone's going to get mad at you for losing a little bit of DPS. So if you find it easier to manage the fight when your rotation is consistent, that can also be true in Savage, then there might also be an argument for sitting on your cooldown anyway, to make sure that your burst is correct. Because the thing is, if you're a Gunbreaker and your Gnashing Fang combo is suddenly not in your No Mercy, unlikely, and it's not too costly to move it due to 30-second cooldown, 20-second duration, all that, but that will make your No Mercy window really awkward and janky, and that might confuse you so much that you're going to make mistakes just because of that. Yeah, Angel says Samurai is easy, but when you get into optimization rotation, it gets way harder. And that is actually correct. It's the same with Monk. The reason why I feel that Monk isn't super hard, all things considered, is actually not because its optimization rotation is easy. It's not. It's very hard. It's because the damage difference between performing your rotation perfectly and almost perfectly is not that big. In fact, the damage difference between like performing your rotation decently well and performing your rotation with a lot of mistakes is not super massive. Like, it's significant, but it's not like, it's much less than other jobs. There's a reason why the Dragon Kick rotation still lives on despite the buffs that crit has given to Bootshine. Dragon Kick rotation isn't like competitive with the proper rotation, but it's okay enough. Like, it's good enough that people can get by with it. But yeah, the reason why I find Dragoon to be the hardest of the melee DPS is specifically because of the OGCD drifting. You have 3 buffs that you want to align in a very strict way, and there's so many other things that also have to align perfectly. Meanwhile, with Samurai, I mean, if Zenye comes out like a few GCDs later, it's not like the end of the world. It's not going to affect your other GCDs and OGCDs. And Oginamikiri has a 30-second grace period. Like, there's a lot of things going for Samurai that makes it not too overwhelming. And Ninja has like a 35, almost 40-second window where it's kind of just kind of vibing, right? It's just kind of there, just doing 1, 2, 3 combos. So that makes it very, very like easy to deal with if you can do the burst right. But the burst isn't that easy. Like I said, that's something to consider. Hey Lemon, hope you're doing well. You're not too late. We are actually still like, we haven't even gotten halfway yet. In fact, I think we're just about to get to the reviews. I don't know if Imi is still here. They did mention that they were a little bit strict on time. But I'll still review it. Hopefully they can find the review in the VOD afterwards. Little Billy's movie says RE melee flavors of difficulty. Ninja was my first job to max, and Mudra combos were fairly smooth to commit to muscle memory. Yeah, it's not too hard. There's also a lot of ways to memorize it. Like my ninja guide, like my low-level ninja guide, should give like a strategy to memorize it. Like some tips and tricks to do it. Well, I mean, little Billy, you don't have to unlearn them. It's always fun to see a monk doing the positionals that no longer exist. It's always fun. Like, then you know that it's someone who's been committed to the job for a long time. Like, they're so committed that they can't unlearn it. I think that's pretty funny. And speaking of pretty funny, if I remember correctly, the way that my bars used to be was like this, because these were the side combos and these were the back combos. So when I learned that there was like no combos on these, I just moved like this. So now this is the buff debuff stuff and this is the pure damage stuff. Right. So regarding clips. So the first one we have is Ymir. I can't remember if it was 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. We had a clip from Ymir where I talked a lot about they had to use Heart of Corundum more. So the key thing that I would like to see here is, of course, a lot more Heart of Corundum. Ymir has said that they did use Heart of Corundum a lot more. That's a little loud. So that's what I'm going to be looking at primarily. Let's see if we can learn some things about Gunbreaker. And Kai, weird, similar name. Reaper is a very good starting choice for a melee DPS. The thing you might want to consider is if you feel that the amount of buttons you get is a little overwhelming, start with a low-level dungeon so that you have less buttons you need to learn. That's my advice. Yeah, I did read the description. Oh, that's a bad start. That is, of course, a disadvantage that sometimes happens when you click your buttons. So Heart of Corundum was used. That's good. This particular pack doesn't really call for any other cooldown, so that's pretty fine. You missed the opportunity to use a Rough Divide, but the mobs were dying anyway, so that's probably fine. That's the Sonic Break outside of No Mercy. I suppose that can fix itself. Yeah. A tip on this particular pull, this particular mob, is that it's pretty common for groups to just let this cast play out, so a lot of healers are expecting this to happen. So if you use Heart of Light, on this, you can reduce the damage. Now, Dretharian is correct, you can stun this mob, but there's a particular reason why you're not stunning this attack. It's because this attack is unavoidable, which means that everyone can just stand still and ignore it. However, this attack is avoidable. So if you stun that real quick, then your healer and potential mages will not have to dodge. They will not have to risk losing damage on dodging. It's really, really weird optimization, I know, but that is the reason. If you've ever seen me tank this dungeon, you will see that I never stun the Winds of Winter, and I always stun the follow-up attack. That is the reason, because it's a DPS game. You can see there, actually, you can actually see here. We're, of course, not here to judge the summoner, what they're doing. The summoner runs, no casting. That was like a good second of DPS loss. I don't know why they was just walking. It could have been that their GCD is still going, but if it wasn't, then that could have been saved by stunning. That was the stun. That's good. Anyway, my point wasn't to say, Ymir, you messed up. You didn't do this optimal thing. It was more to say, general advice. There's a way you can do it. And very true, Gazel. A paladin could shield bash to stun both if they wanted to. It's just, that is... It's also a DPS loss. Like, I've talked about this a lot, but basically, the hyper-focus on damage output sometimes leads us to some weird decisions. Also, I don't even know if I said hi to Maha when they came in. It was probably GCD, yeah, you're probably right, Angel. It was just sometimes you'll see a summoner just kind of get stuck, like, because they were absolutely not in the Ifrit step. You can actually see here, rewind to this, just so that we get this straight. The summoner has just finished their Titan phase, because they just lost the Titan favor. A little difficult to see over the target, but they had the Titan's favor, so that was the Titan step. So that means they're in no mode right now. Or maybe they're still in Titan. They're still in Titan. They might not be in Titan now. Now they got Garuda's favor, so they're in Garuda mode now. Which makes sense, because that's the common, like, order. But because they cast that, we know that they're in Garuda mode. And they were about to cast Slipstream. But it was a good guess, Ulf. It was a good guess. It's just, I noticed the Titan thing. If I hadn't noticed it, I would have just said, you're probably right. I specifically saw it. It might be that they were still in GCD, the reason why they were running. They might also not be. Can't find my mouse. Right. So this next pull is where it starts to get more interesting. But first we have, how do you pull it? AoE attack, that's fine. Another AoE attack, that's fine. Seems like your group isn't the kind to actually, like, go to town on the mobs while they're running, so not super big deal. I would have probably had waited an extra second with double down. That's a big sure I hit everything, but otherwise fine. I would say you should use Heart of Corundum now. You did! Perfect! Perfect! Nice execution there. Very good. maybe you should have, I would say maybe wait 1 extra GCD with Nebula, but it's fine. You're not like hurting for cooldowns. It's probably fine. But I would probably have waited until Heart of Corundum ran out. You could also use Aurora here. That is also like just a detail, but you could use it. You also didn't really use Rough Divide in your No Mercy, so that one is just sitting there. We have a boss. I usually like go a little faster through those because there's a lot less happening. You can kind of follow everything that needs to happen. You have No Mercy. Let's see here. You have everything lined up well enough that you can do everything. So the question is, do you do everything? No Mercy, Gnashing Fang, Jugular Rip, good. Sonic Break, Blasting Zone, Bowshock, very good. Double Down, Bloodfist, and Rough Divide, good. You're getting it. I'm actually impressed that you can reach around to all of the buttons. And for anyone confused a little bit, so Umia is actually clicking their keybinds or their hotbar down here with the mouse, but because of something with the recording software, the mouse does not align with the game screen. So that's why it's a little off. And Heart of Corundum for the tank busters, very nice. That's correct, Wolf. Well, Summoner has the Ifrit casts Slipstream, and unless something gets in the way, they have 1 Ruin 3 cast. Like, just a single Ruin 3 cast. But that is very easy to lose that one if something gets in the way. So something you can do there is that you could stand closer to the boss. You could actually, as you can see here, it's a little difficult to see at a glance, but you could actually stand under the boss. The reason why that's important is because if you had stood under the boss, you might not have delayed your GCD. Rough Divide. Rough Divide. Good. Very good. It is pretty funny, Wolf, that part of the reason why people ironically call Summoner the honorary range DPS is because it has so much ranged, or so much instant attacks. Why you're not using Blasting Zone? Blasting Zone? Blasting Zone? Oh, the boss is dead. Fair enough. That actually happens to me quite a lot. If I'm very focused on a rotation, I'll just be like, alright, 2-minute burst, here we go. Oh, the boss is dead. Right. I'll just awkwardly shuffle onward in the dungeon. It's extra funny if it's like Black Mage, so you can just see the ley lines. I'm like... You did use Heart of Corundum, that's very good. You didn't use Rough Divide in your No Mercy again. You used a Solid Barrel there, out of combo, again. But you didn't use Rough Divide. I do recommend using Rough Divides every time you every time you enter No Mercy, use both of your Rough Divides. And the reason why I suggest that is because if you're not using your Rough Divides, then they go to waste. And because of how No Mercy centric Gunbreaker's rotation is, most Gunbreakers are not going to use Rough Divide outside of No Mercy. They're just not going to. So the perspective of going, well, sometimes Rough Divide is good for utility. It is. Correct. But often you'll forget. So it's better to just go, well, I'm in No Mercy, so I have to use Blasting Zone, Bowshock, 2 Rough Divides, all that. Like, just go down the checklist. If you really want to optimize on it, you use Rough Divide on the healthiest mob in the pack. So like you actually have to like switch target to the specific one with the most HP. The reason for this is that you want, optimally, you want all the mobs in a pack to die simultaneously. And the reason why that is the case is, of course, because everyone's cleaving. So if you can make sure that all things die at once, you don't like have this awkward like 2-3 GZDs where you're just 1-3 comboing. And if you've ever been in a dungeon and wondered how you killed like 90% of a pack, and then everyone is just like awkwardly like just smacking away on this single mob, it happens a lot in dead ends in my experience. And that 1 or 2 mobs are just there, no one's using their cooldowns because, well, the boss is coming up. I don't want to use my cooldowns, and the mob is almost dead. And then you like spend 30 seconds or 20 seconds, not exaggerate too much, just awkwardly smacking away on this one mob. Whereas if you had like spread your single target or single target centric damage, like Flare, because Flare actually does the majority of its damage to one target, if you actually spread it so you make sure everything dies somewhat equally, you don't get this situation. Just general advice. That is a little awkward when you go into a boss fight with No Mercy almost ready. Oh. Rough Divide. Rough Divide. Oh, Rough Divide missed. And now Rough Divide is technically just drifting in a way. It's just sitting there not being used. Oop. Glare. Oh, I feel like every time we have clips of this dungeon, someone gets hit. So something I do want to add is that some players like to keep one of the Rough Divides in case they need it for mobility. That's fine. The reason why I'm assuming that you're not is because, well, I see this a lot more with not Paladin and not Gunbreaker. Like, Warriors are a lot more likely to use Onslaught for just the damage, and Dark Knights are very likely to use Plunge for just just moving around. They have more freedom because they don't have like a damage buff to align with outside of raid buffs, of course. You know what I mean. So Gunbreaker and Paladin are very unlikely, or it's not as common to see Gunbreakers and Paladins use Rough Divide and intervene as like mobility buttons. It's really weird. It makes more sense for Paladin because Paladin is often like, oh, that's fine, I have Divine Might, I'll just cast Holy Spirit as I like casually shuffle towards the boss, it's fine. This boss, this pack is quite painful at times. It's one of the pulls where it's not a bad idea to like double down on cooldowns. Depends on the healer, of course. But yeah, I didn't talk very much about it in this clip, but I just wanted to mention that Ymir did prove that they got a lot better about using Heart of Corundum a lot. That's very good. That's very good. And that is of course the reason why I'm looking at something else. As I said, usually I'll talk about the things that are going wrong, right? I will highlight when you're doing well, but I'll of course go, well, you're not using your Rough Divide enough, which is such a nitpicky thing. You missed another Rough Divide, by the way. Or maybe not. That actually worked out in the end. Maybe that was intentional. Nice. Clever. I'm gonna retract that one. You didn't miss that. You planned it, probably. You might want to use some Rough Divides now, though. By the way, I hope you all are liking the boss music Speedy Cake mix we're listening to on account of playing it in double time. The only thing missing is that it could have been like chipmunk voices. Then we really, or chipmunk like a little higher pitch. Then we really have it there. Emir says, I usually save a rough divide for mobility. That's fair enough. The reason why I assumed you didn't is because sometimes you didn't. But that's fair enough. But one thing that I think is very interesting then, Emir, is that every time you're in it, like if you're recording your fight, like for example, you might want to rewatch this on your own time. One thing I would recommend that you look at as someone who likes to save a mobility option just in case, pay attention to how much of a boss fight where Rough Divide is sitting on 2 charges, where you could have spent them. Because the thing is, and I give advice on this in my tank guides, I'm pretty sure on most of them, that you can save a mobility option in case you might need it, but often you won't. Often you won't. And more importantly, when you've done a dungeon a bunch of times, at some point you will probably learn whether you did need it. Like at some point you'll learn, well, like exactly as I was saying before, that I said, oh, you missed a Rough Divide on the boss, and then I see the boss move away, and then you use Rough Divide to close the gap. That's why I said I'm retracting it. It was not a mistake. It looks like you planned that. That was a point where it made sense. On the first boss in that dungeon could also make sense to save it. The thing is that I'm pretty sure that the boss, like when they like jump across the arena, they typically jump to predictable spots. So you have some level of ability to just be there in advance. So like you don't have to use Rough Divide. Like that is actually the key thing, is that filling with lightning shot because you can't be in melee range is is in some cases necessary, but often it's a crutch for I'm not sure when I have to step out of this mechanic. So I stepped too early, so now I have to use lightning shot as a GCD to fill because I'm out here too early. But you will learn with time whether you actually had to do that or whether you could stay for longer, right? And it's the same with Rough Divide, is that often you can actually figure out where the mob is going. Like if you've seen me do dead ends, the final boss there when it uses prance, I don't know how many actually know dead ends by heart. Dead ends, the final boss, the Sphinx looking thing, when it uses prance, it jumps to 4 spots in the arena. It will either do it in like a circular fashion, clockwise or counterclockwise, I can't remember if it's only one specific order, or it will do it in like a Z shape. A Z shape. But the thing is, it will be looking at where it is jumping first. So it will have like a huge cast time with like, I'm going to use prance, and while it is doing that, it's actually looking at where it's going first. So you, like when you have done your final GCD you can fit in before it starts jumping, you can just run in advance and just go over where it's going to land. And just continue rotation, then just follow it around. Sprint might help you there. Depending on the order, it might not be safe to follow it around all the way. I have talked about the fact that the Z shape version is really hard to dodge, because you have to do it in a very specific way to actually be able to walk out of it. Otherwise you probably need sprint. But yeah, my point is that you can save a mobility option in case you need it. But as you get better and more acquainted with a dungeon or a raid or whatever it is, I would say try and see if you don't need it. Like, maybe you don't need it. If you know you need it, fine. If you don't, consider using it. And the reason why I say fine if you need it is because, and I talk about this in my tank guides as well, I'm pretty sure. So, Rough Divide is 150 potency. If you use your Rough Divide, like if you just use it at some point, like not in No Mercy, that's 150 potency. If you use it in No Mercy, you get an extra 30. Like just an extra 30 potency. Now, remember that. 30 is what you're getting for spending Rough Divide in the optimal time. Like, yes, if there's rate buffs, it's a little more complicated calculation, but about 30. Now, Keen Edge does 200 potency. It's your weakest GCD that you're commonly expected to use over the course of a fight. If you spend, and if your GCD is 2.5, and you spend half a second with your GCD ready, because you're like casually strolling down. Keen Edge is your weakest attack that you're commonly expected to use. I mean, I've done this a lot of times in this stream. I'm really sorry about that. If we say you have a GCD of 2.5, then if you spend half a second with your GCD ready, like casually walking down to the boss or whatever it is, then you've wasted at least a fifth of a Keen Edge. Probably a fifth of something better, but absolutely at least a fifth of a Keen Edge is something you will have wasted, which is 40 potency. Do you see where I'm going with this? Using Rough Divide as a utility tool, as long as you're using it, like, the key thing is that you're actually using it, but as long as you're using it, throwing Rough Divide to make sure that you're always casting, as Phil says, always be casting, is a lot more valuable than sitting on Rough Divide so you can use it in No Mercy. The only reason why I assume most Gunbreakers and Paladins aren't using their gap closers for mobility is because a lot of players find it very difficult to have like a burst rotation that that like varies. So they want to keep both Rough Divides or both intervenes so that their burst is the same every time, which is understandable. And this also like circles back to the thing I was talking about with Wolf earlier, with drifting. You really want you want those Rough Divides to get the extra potency, even if it's not a lot. It's like on the fly. It can be really difficult to calculate, which is why I'm saying, if your GCD is ready, or it's going to be ready, and you will have to like jog down to the boss, use Rough Divide. It's a DPS gain. Trust me. The intro version of Proto Carbuncle Devour. True. Also less punishing somehow. Saint Chief says, do you know what the GS for the final Mandible will be? What do you mean with GS? Gear score? Are you asking what item level they will be? Lemon says I gotta go. My body decided that today it will not be kind. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you get better, Lemon. They will be 665. And they will be best in slot. Regardless of whether you're a Savage Raider or not. They will be best in slot. So if you're a Savage Raider and you're like, well, relic weapons are kind of bad, like they're really always behind, yeah, but in the final patch of an expansion, the relic weapons become best in slot. In the final patch, they become best in slot. And what I mean by final patch is there's around start next month, we're expecting patch 6.5. That's not the final patch. About 2 months after that, ish, like around December, right? We should expect 6.55 or 6.58 or something like that. That is the final patch. I think they said January. Might be January. The reason why I said probably December is because often the minor patches happen around 2 months after the major patches. Often it happens like that. But given that we know that the next expansion is coming next summer, they're not in a rush to quickly get the final patch out, right? It's not a bad idea to give it an extra month. That makes sense, Phil. Okay, I couldn't remember if they said January. I specifically looked up, let me see, maybe I have it. yeah, I have it. Here it is. Early October, patch 6.5. Late October, patch 6.51. Mid-January, patch 6.55. And I'm assuming that patch 6.55 is the one where we get the relic weapon upgraded, because that's usually how it goes. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm pretty sure that patch 6.51 in Endwalker has often been where they've added some, like, either it has been like a PvP season thing, or it has been like some addition that had like a very like time-sensitive release. Like the first raid tier came out in patch 6.01, if I remember correctly, and not in 6.0. Raise your bets now if the final upgrade will be bought for 3 times 500 tombstone mats. Oh boy. Yeah, exactly, Phil. I'm like, let me put it like this. I'm not a betting man. Not a betting man. But when this like step of the relic weapon came out, I had already stockpiled 1,500 like tombstones, just in case it was that. And I was right. And I'm going to do that again. Just in case. Because it might. And there's no loss in trying. You save some time. Saint the Chief says, so the patch in October will increase Mandible item level 2, right? Nope. Nope. It will not. The Mandible weapons have typically been upgraded in, I'm pretty sure in a minor patch, but not in the 6 point, like not in the major, or the like in a 2-week period. It's usually halfway through a major patch, and usually a major patch takes up around 4 months of duration. That is why I would predict, like blindly predict, that 6.55 would be sometime in December, but they've specifically said January. There is 2 clips in here. It's just, there's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. The other clip is from Gazel. We can watch that too, of course. There's time. Don't worry. It was just now we were talking about something. But yeah, Saint Chief says there's no point at all in doing P12. Depends. Depends. You need a cough drop? No, I'm fine. Depends on what you need. What I mean by that is, if you want to start Savage, then right now the 650 weapons you can buy with the item from P12N is your best option to start. Like, that is actually your best weapon before you go in. And once you're farming, like once you're starting to progress, you can get an item that can upgrade that to 660, which is even better. And you need to beat P12S to get the 665 there, because that actually also drops a 665. So if you want to Savage Raid today, then there is a good reason to get the Tombstone weapon. You've cleared all Savage except 12. Well, there is reason to get it. Remember, the relic weapon doesn't become best in slot until January. And if you're not motivated to do content because it will become irrelevant in 4 months, I just want to remind you that you do, like, humans even do things that become outdated even faster than that. For example, most of us brush our teeth every day. But technically, you're brushing your teeth today is outdated tomorrow. And most importantly, I heard someone liken it to like a sports season. Imagine if people just gave up on sports because, well, even if we win the tournament this time, we won't be the best next season. So yeah. My advice on that is mainly that don't become a Savage Raider because you want the best gear in the game. Like, reason for that makes sense. Don't do Savage Raiding for the gear. Reason is that what can you use that gear for? What can you use it for? You can specifically use your gear for Savage Raiding. That's what it's for. So if you don't actually like Savage Raiding, then doing this thing that you don't like so that you get gear that is literally only used for that is not very effective, like for your personal enjoyment of the game. I love Savage Raiding, I just don't like P12. Oh. You know what, fair enough. You know what, I respect that. If you love Savage Raiding, but you don't like P12, so you haven't done it, that is actually exactly what I'm suggesting. Like, if you like doing P9 to 11, just do that. But if you don't actually like the P12 fight, that's fine. Gazel says you might want to wait till 7.0 because every gear upgrade you do now will be outdated. Yeah, the problem is that, and this is actually something that is, oh, you want to pass P9 to 11? Well, then you might want to get the P12 weapon because, I mean, you will have more time to pass if you get it now. But yeah, Gazel has a very good point there. There's a this is a reason why a lot of gamers, a lot of players are a lot more motivated by a horizontal gearing system. The problem is that a vertical gearing system is what Final Fantasy XIV has. What that means is that you get better gear, you get better gear, you get better gear. Like, that's basically what it means, is that you use your better gear to get better gear. And it keeps, like, every few months they add, like, a new tier above that, and above that, and above that, forever and ever and ever and ever. That is vertical gear progression. Horizontal gear progression is Guild Wars 2. There's, like, I believe it's called exotic gear at max level. That is the best gear in the game. And you can technically craft that, I'm pretty sure. You can craft that. You can farm that. Oh, sorry, it's not exotic. Exotic is the orange one, right? I meant the ones with the pink name. What is that called? Ascended. Sorry, Ascended. Ascended gear has the highest... No, listen, Angel. Let me finish. Ascended gear has the highest stat total in Guild Wars 2. And it is... Okay, it's not easy to get at first, but once you have some, it's easy to get more, because you can do the hard content that gives it. Legendary gear has the same stats as Ascended gear. Angel. The same stats as Ascended gear. Then you might ask, but wait, why would I want Legendary gear then? Especially when Angel clearly put it that it's a grind. Two reasons. The first one is, of course, because they look cool. Which often is good reason enough, right? People are doing ultimates just to get a fancy weapon skin. The other reason is that, you know how the relic weapons from Shadowbringers... I don't know why I'm still carrying this. the weapons from Shadowbringers have completely and fully customizable stats on them. You have to pay some poetics to change the stats, but for the most part, they are completely customizable. You can make them exactly the way you want. The only limitation is that healer gear and tank gear cannot get direct hit. That is like the limitation. Legendary gear in Guild Wars 2, you can just right click it and say I wanted to have these stats now. For free. Just for free. You can just right click and change it to have a different stat line. And someone mentioned, I believe it was Intila, that said at least Final Fantasy XIV doesn't have like 10 different stats to deal with. So let's see, Guild Wars 2 has crit chance, crit damage, upfront damage power, dot damage power, buff duration. I think there's also like cooldown reduction or something like that. I can't remember if it's like 6 or 8, but there's a lot of stats in that game. And sometimes you'll be like, okay, so what gear do I need? And it's like, oh, you need this specific gear piece with like 5 stats on it. Oh yeah, technically you also have like primary stats, like, well, you also have like health and toughness that you also need to care about. Sometimes. If you don't want to be a glass cannon. Beamy Poem says, I cleared P12S in Party Finder. It took 5 weeks and 40 part 1 kills to finally clear it. But at the end, it was rewarding to clear my first Savage tier, and I'm glad I didn't give up. That's good. And I think a huge important point to that is also that if you had fun doing it, and just to clarify on that statement, even though you're sitting there being annoyed that people are dying, you could still have fun. You can still have fun even though you're like annoyed and angry. Like, the difference between going, I don't want to be here, why am I even sitting here and playing, and going, oh, my group disbanded. Alright, back in Party Finder we go again. Like, the big difference here is that if you're actually enjoying what you're doing, you're probably going back in. Like, you're getting kicked out and you're going, alright then. Whew, that was annoying. Let's go again. You know what I mean? Also, congratulations with the ultimate weapon, Angel. See, vitality, toughness, healing power, concentration, power, ferocity, precision, condition, damage, expertise. Yeah, those are all stats. That's correct. Are they all stats? I feel like there's something missing. It's a little hard because this list I found doesn't just show the stats next to each other. Power, precision, toughness, vitality, concentration, condition damage, expertise, ferocity, healing power, boon duration. But that one's technically coming from something else, I believe. That is from concentration, so that is actually not counting. So that's 9 stats. That's 9 stats. 9 stats. That's right, boon duration is concentration. The reason why I got confused by that one is because I remember there are specific things that increase boon duration separately, I believe. Anyway, big side track, right? Little Billy says, I'd be interested to see more varied stats to build around in 14, but I can't really think of any that would be a natural progression on the existing system. Well, I think a really good solution to one problem with stats in Final Fantasy XIV is do something about crit. Let's start with that. But if you do anything about crit, then direct hit just becomes also crit, so get rid of that. Add something more interesting. I don't know what to add. But there are two ways to fix crit. Either remove the crit damage component, or make a separate stat that is the crit damage component. The problem is that if you keep the crit damage component, then we will just land in a situation where the optimal build is to have max crit chance and damage. So, you know, might be better to just do something about crit. I believe the buff that gives cooldown reduction is alacrity, yes. I believe it's because it makes your cooldowns tick faster. In Guild Wars 2, of course. Sorry. Right, so let's take a look at the other clip that I have lined up. That is, of course, Gazel, who plays the game on Japanese with no sound. What was it? I believe I had a note about that. It is mostly just a demonstration of a really fast run. So it's more interesting to see how fast you can have an ether font run. So this was below 13 minutes, as you can see. So like... So we... it's fine, guys. I'll just speed it up a little bit so that we can get the key things. So the things that are interesting is how did we get such a fast run? The first thing is that jobs that are less dependent on rate buffs, and what I mean by dependent on rate buffs is jobs that have rate buffs. Basically, if your healer in a random dungeon is Astrologian, then it is severely weakened compared to a white mage or a sage. And the reason for that is simply because Astrologian is balanced around divination hitting 8 players. But there's only 4 in a dungeon. So Astrologian just like loses half of the value from divination. This applies to all jobs with rate buffs. All of them. Which means that jobs that have either worse rate buffs, like they're less impactful in their kit, or jobs with no rate buffs, tend to perform really well. I think this is part of the reason why tanks tend to have a bigger impact on the total damage in a dungeon. It also helps that most tanks have well, actually all tanks have a big 1-minute cooldown. So they can just use that every minute, and each pull is like every minute. So Warrior opens every AoE pull within a release. And Paladin opens every AoE pull with Fight or Flight and Requiescent. And Gunbreaker can open every AoE pull with No Mercy and Double Down. And Dark Knight can also open every pull with Delirium and Quietus if they want. It's a little less explosive, but you still do that. They also get to start every fight with mostly full MP. So like that plays a factor. But Machinist has nothing. Summoner has a 3% damage bonus rate buff. So it's not like the biggest thing. Scholar has changed stratagem, so that hurts a little bit. But Scholar has like the best AoE spam of all the healers. So that like brings it up again. It's slightly stronger than Dyscrasia. Ymir Esteem is a 2-minute cooldown. So it's only available on one of the packs. Exactly, also Art of War is cool. But Art of War is really the strongest AoE attack. Speaking of which... I know we're not like here to review, but you will probably gain more damage by stopping here and using Art of War. You did use Art of War, but then you kept running. You could have, this is something I do sometimes, is that I will actually, as the healer, I will actually, like, stop and, like, follow the pack. Like, stay ahead of them so that I can Art of War all the way up. Instead of, like, focusing on sticking with my tank, I'll just, like, follow the pack. And that can be a slight damage gain. Just a little thought, Gassel. And you can do that. The main thing is that you were actually, like, doing something with every GCD. I saw you were using bio on everything. Little Billy says, I remember in my time in WoW, there were minor additional stats gear could roll, like move speed, life leech, passive avoidance, and I have not heard about the infinite durability one, but the other ones, sure, those are tertiary stats. There's not really much to say here. If everyone's doing their rotation correctly, then that's good. Some tanks go speed. That's true. On the bright side, if your tank is a warrior, they probably don't need your sacred soil for the first 8 seconds. This is also something that I've talked about before, is that if you curate your healing... That was really fast. What? We had the big icicles, right? Those are the big ones. We didn't even get to see the both small and big crystals spawn. That is extremely fast, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, if you curate your healing performance to your tank, you can optimize a lot. Obviously, Sage, there isn't that much to curate, because like you have a vested interest in using your cooldown, like using your Adder Skull anyway. But if your tank is like using Hallowed Ground immediately, then you might as well not use a Karakuri, like wait those 10 seconds. That applies with like Warrior as well. If you know the Warrior is really, really aggressive with using Bloodwetting, you can wait until they use Bloodwetting. And specifically for Scholar, the advantage is that if you don't have to use Sacred Soil on cooldown, then sometimes you will have, you know, an extra ether flow. Now, I know that 100 potency isn't that much. I know. But 100 potency is 100 potency. Know what I mean? Indestructible. Right. I don't remember that one, but I suppose it's just because I never had our repair problems, so I basically just like blacked it out, like, oh, sure. But yeah, the interest in optimizing as a healer around what your tank is doing is both that it makes it easier for you to keep them alive, but simultaneously, with a Scholar specifically, it increases your damage output. By a little bit. Like a very, very little bit. But for the other healers, it's mostly like a matter of like resource preservation. Like, this is something that I've heard a lot on my Astrologian short. So I've said before, I have 4 shorts where I talk about a strategy. So a strategy, not the strategy, on how to keep your tank alive and your group alive when doing a big dungeon pull at max level. And the Astrologian one looks absolutely ridiculous because I'm like, okay, so before you pull, you use this. Just imagine like a scroll just coming down like, you use all of this. Which sounds silly when you think about it. And in most situations, you don't need half of it. But the reason why... Oops, you got hit there. Well, the boss is dead, so it didn't even matter. Damage optimization. Wait a minute. It died in the middle of the multi-jumps, right? That is like a really insane group. Okay, Maha, thank you for joining, and have a good night. What was I saying? What was I talking about? Oh boy. Trying to find my way back. Anyone remember? Scholar shot. Oh, right. The shot. Thank you, Tristan. Also, hey. The Astrologian shot goes into like a gigantic list of cooldowns to use. But you don't need half of it if your tank is good. Most of the time, your tank is good enough that you don't need half of it. And the thing is that I don't think, like, I think a lot of astrologians don't really, like, count having to cast Benefic 2 once as a big issue, or having to cast Aspected Benefic in the middle of the fight as an issue at all. So they just go, I don't need to do all this because my pulls are fine, even though they maybe they're the, I talked about this in my 6 tips for healers, they might be the aggressive buff maintainer, you know, the ones that go, oh, you don't have your buffs, let me just give you an Aspected Benefic here, whoop, that you didn't need. They won't notice that they could do more damage, because that's not their focus. Their focus is keeping up their healing on you, keeping you at full HP, you the tank, of course. But using all of those cooldowns means that you could do more damage. You could do more damage if your tank actually needs it. And sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, you get a tank that doesn't use any cooldowns. Or you get like that warrior that has looked at too many warrior memes and genuinely think that Bloodwetting is the only button you need. So they don't use any other cooldowns. At all. Is this mechanic even going to resolve? This is insane damage. Did you examine any of the players in that run, Gazel? I'm going to... Let me just check something. Yeah, that is... So the Machinist is probably full Savage Gear, just based on their HP. Good chance that the Summoner also has full Savage Gear based on their HP. The Warrior might... Let me just see. I'm just testing something here. The Warrior might be wearing like full 650 gear and have a food buff. Like, if I had a 650 weapon, I'm pretty sure I would have 116,000. I'm going to guess that the Warrior had 650 across the board and a 640 ring. The 2 DPS were probably Savage Raiders. That is, of course, also a motivation to get the best gear in the game. To just, like, blast through dungeons. But the reason why I don't really... So the reason why, just to be clear, the reason why I... also, Tristan, don't worry about it. You mentioning short got me back on track, so thank you. And also thank you, Spencer. Well, Spencer's stank breath specifically checked. Specifically. The reason why I don't really use the argument of, but what if I wanted the best gear to just zoom through content as an argument to, like, Savage Raid, is because I don't think you would care about that by the time you have the Savage content. Like, have done the Savage content. Like, I'm pretty sure by the time you already have full 665, the only reason you're doing an expert roulette is because you need this. That's the only reason. You also have a 4% stat buff from having 4 rolls in the party. That's also true. It's possible that the warrior just had this. That is possible. And a food buff. Something like that. But yeah, by the time you already have the full best in slot gear, I don't think it's very glamorous to be like, oh, now I can easily, like, rush through mount farming of Shadowbringers fights. I'm pretty sure that kind of loses its charm at that point. Like, then maybe you'd want to do, like, current raid tier mount farming or something. Current expansion mount farming or something. But I don't think you would care that much about, like, collecting gear just to make damage number bigger in that context of, like, trouncing easy content. If that makes sense. That's the reason why I typically don't even think about that as a as like an argument for why you would want to savage raid. Is because usually the reason why you want to savage raid is either because you enjoy savage raiding or there's some reward. And the problem is, if you just want some reward, then you're forcing yourself to do it even though you don't like it. If you like savage raiding, but you're doing it because you want the reward, that's a different story. I'm pretty sure that a lot of players are like this. What was the name? I think so. We have people that do savage raiding for the gear. Those are the people that are the most toxic, because from their perspective, every time they wipe, that means they have to sit there for another 5 to 10 minutes. Then you have the players that are there because they like savage raiding. I'm going to say that there's a pretty good chance that that is like Sainted Chief, who said, I don't want to do P12 because I don't like it. I like savage raiding, but not P12, so I'm just not gonna do it. Like, makes sense. If you like savage raiding, but you're actually doing it because you want the gear, like, you like it and you want the gear, then you're doing P12 despite not liking it. Because you want the gear. Right? And of course there's also some players in between that like P12 and are just raiding because they like it. But that is like the thing. If you're doing savage raiding, like if you're interested in doing savage raiding because of glamour reasons or the mount, but you don't actually like savage raiding, that's when I go, just wait until like the next expansion. It's going to be way easier. Well, significantly easier. Not like trivial, but significantly easier if you just wait a bit. Gazel says my item level is only 646. I mean, my item level is also 646. My other tanks are 648. The only reason why I was interested in those numbers, Gazel, wasn't to like say how strong are you. It was more that for the bosses to go down that efficiently, it needs to be like best in slot geared players. But if just the DPS players are best in slot, that already makes a huge difference. Also, that's true, Phil. There's probably a pretty good chance that usually, if they're doing like an expert roulette, they have a static. They'll just like one of the tanks, 2 of the DPS, and 1 of the healers just group up and just sprint through that instead of just queuing, right? What job were you playing, Sainted Chief? Little Bailey says, I had a good time leading some max level, but non-Savage Raider newbies getting them E4S mounts. Took a few lumps at first, but once we were surviving the first 3 to 4 mechanics, the damage was done and we won. Well, there you go. That's very nice. I also have fun with doing... so sometimes you may see on this channel when I can get the group together, we will do mount farming streams where we do old content. And, I mean, usually I become the raid leader if necessary. And that is, like, something that I praise about the fact that Final Fantasy XIV doesn't have, like, super... extremely high scaling between expansions. What I mean by that is that even though we're in Endwalker, there are bosses that can give you a challenge in Stormblood solo. Like, yeah, you can technically solo O12S Phase 2. You can do that, but I'm pretty sure it's not easy. I remember back in late Shadowbringers, A12S became soloable at some point with crit luck on a warrior. Just to underline that, warrior, who's like the job that just goes, I crit now, and they do, needed luck on their crits to beat A12S solo. In Shadowbringers, 2 expansions later. And the reason why I think it's good that it is this way is that that means you can just, like, grab a few friends that are not, like, Savage Raider level players and just go and do content that is difficult. It's not meant to be beaten easily, so it will not, like, it will give you no quarter, but it will challenge you without being overwhelming, right? Like, Stormblood trials are very easy for the most part. You can probably do all of them with, like, with, like, 4 players, I think. If not even less than that. And Shadowbringers trials are hard, but most of them, you don't have to play them perfectly. Like, you don't have to play them perfectly to survive. You can make extremely massive mistakes and somehow still make it through because of the, like, stat difference of being an Endwalker. And that is, like, a way to give you, like, the training wheels to become better at boss mechanics. Like, the only other way to get acquainted with limit cut other than doing the current fight that has limit cut is to do an old fight with limit cut. Sainted Chief says samurai. What stats does the samurai weapon have? I happen to know that the paladin weapon is bad, but still best. I will break the wheel with my blade. Oh, it has way less... I mean, you can fix that with true crit materia, then it's mostly fine. You can get it to 284. 284 crit. So you're, like, very close to the same. For a 660 weapon. Like, you're going to have 22 less crit. That's like 2 breakpoints. You're going to have 0.2% less chance and damage. Like, yeah, you won't be perfect, but I mean, if you want to do passing, you have to have full best in slot, right? You have to do that if you want to have the 100 pass. Yeah, exactly. When you said that the samurai weapon was bad, I was picturing this. Like, I was expecting this. Just for anyone not in the know, Paladin hates speed. Like, I think some Paladins would rather have 0 speed than that. Like, they would rather have that the weapon just didn't have the stats. because it messes with their rotation and stuff. I'd just rather have nothing. But nope, it's not better than tenacity. Actually, I'm pretty sure paladins would rather have tenacity. Basically, paladins get so little value out of speed that they would, as I said, rather have nothing because it messes with their rotation. They would rather have nothing, which means that tenacity, which is something without messing with their rotation, is better. And all tank weapons have that. I mean, Saint Chief. Even if the 660 weapon for Samurai had crit and direct hit flipped, there's a completely different reason why you need the 665 weapon to pass optimally. Now, so you see it has a physical damage value of 131. Exactly, the +1 weapon damage. 1 + 1 weapon damage is worth more than everything else. Hey, hey Raven, how are you doing? Darius Raven. Yeah, that is actually the reason why paladins, like casual paladins, that don't go for like savage, are recommended to grab this. Well, not that sword. This sword, but this shield, because this shield has better stats on it. Even though it has slightly less stats on it, it's a better shield. But the sword has +1 weapon damage. It's really silly like that. Really silly. Running Palace of the Dead. Are you doing it solo or with friends? Solo going for title. How far are you? What floor? Are you winning? On Sage, so far my highest is 147. Oh. I imagine when you get to like the high 170s, you're going to have some speedrunning problems. Not necessarily, but I could imagine that you might get some trouble with the timer. I've only gone beyond like floor 100 solo once, but I got to like floor 70 something with Summoner. The reason why time management becomes an issue is because mobs start to have ridiculous amounts of HP. So it takes you so long to kill something, and because you have to kill a certain amount of mobs on each floor, you just like you have to find exactly the mobs you can kill the fastest, kill them, and move on. But I hope you get really far. Angel says last year healers had determination, piety on their weapons. Exactly, precisely. That's what I expected. Like when you say my weapon choice is terrible, I'm like expecting there's no crit on it. Which, by the way, so sad that it is like that. It's pretty funny that for a tank, you can be sad to find speed on gear that you have to take, because like 3 of the 4 tanks have either straight up hatred for speed, Paladin, or like not a particular need for it, warrior, and to some degree Gunbreaker, to the point that even though tenacity is kinda worse, tenacity is better in the light of, well, I don't want speed. And healers instead have the problem that piety is like a red light, green light kind of stat. Meanwhile, DPS jobs, some DPS jobs really hate it when they have to take some speed. Reaper, ranged physical, red mage, a little bit Dragoon, ninja. Wait, there exist jobs that don't mind speed on their gear. Let me say it like that instead. And those are summoner, monk, and samurai. There you go. And a little bit Dragoon. But the problem with piety, they don't mind it, but they all have to hit specific speeds. That's true. That is more to say, monk usually needs enough speed that you won't be forced to go beyond it, and you won't be forced to fall below it necessarily. Like, let me clarify on that. If your build requires you to have 0 speed on it, like as an actual nothing, then any gear piece that has speed on it becomes a problem, right? The Tombstone gear has 2 speed pieces for tanks, for example. If you don't mind speed, but it's not like the best stat in the world, then you don't mind if there's a few pieces with speed on it. You don't even mind taking speed over piety, for example. Thank you for checking in, Rust. I hope you have a good evening. But if your requirement is super strict, but isn't like 0 speed, then you can make it work. Like, you can make it work. Like, look at this. So my monk is just crafted, set, and a relic weapon, right? So how did I make that work? Incidentally, part of the reason why my Reaper speed is kinda weird is because of monk, if I remember correctly. Yeah, we can see speed melts on items where I couldn't fit more crit anyway. We see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, because the skill speed on the weapon is technically 2 materia worth. It's around 6 materia, and just the random speed on my gear. If I needed that to say 2, like the weapon skill had to, like the recast time on my weapon skills had to say exactly 2, then there was no way to make that happen. So like, the difference between having a specific requirement to how much speed you need, but it's not 0, means that it is like workable. You can do something with it. Whereas if it's exactly 0 or exactly everything, then it's really hard. And what I mean by exactly everything is, oh no! My Tombstone weapon has crit as its secondary stat instead of its primary. So I have 20 less crit than I could have had. Like, that kind of everything. Like, if you want to do the maximum possible damage, well, then it needs to have full crit on everything, right? Saint Chief says, I've been thinking, wouldn't crit be kinda less value on Samurai since half of crit's value is in crit chance, yet all of Samurai's big hitters are 100% crit rate? That used to be a problem. Damage dealt is increased when under an effect that raises critical hit rate. That sounds like they mean raid buffs. This is technically an effect that increases your crit rate. So, no. That used to be a problem. That actually also used to be part of the argument for why the Dragon Kick rotation worked. It used to be. The reason was really strange, but the long and the short of it is, before, Bootshine, was a guaranteed 310 potency crit. But if you already have 30% chance to crit, and Bootshine crits 100% of the time, but it's 10% less potency than Dragon Kick, if, just hypothetically, you chose to use Dragon Kick instead, and just for the sake of example, it was a crit, then you did more damage than if you had used Bootshine. Right? Because it's 10 more potency. That used to be the case. And the interesting thing about this is that that meant that if you were really lucky, Dragon Kick was actually objectively better than Bootshine. Doing your rotation based on an assumption that you're lucky is not smart. Don't do that. But hypothetically, it made sense. Like, it was better if you were lucky. On average, it was better if your crit chance was like 80%. Then on average, Dragon Kick would actually beat Bootshine. If you had enough crit stat that your crit chance was 80%, then Dragon Kick would win 100% of the time. Now, that, I believe I calculated, required like 7,000 something crit rate. I think, something like that, 7 or 8,000. It's unreachable, just to be clear, and in the next expansion, you will need more crit to reach the same amount. That's the reason why ratings work, is that the reason why you don't have like absolutely ludicrous amounts of stats if you were low level with high stats is because scaling. So we will not reach that in the next expansion either. But after I made that Dragon Kick short, they changed how crits, or rather guaranteed critical hits and guaranteed direct hits, interact with critical hit chance and direct hit chance. The way they changed it is that if an attack is guaranteed to critical hit, so it gains no value from critical hit rate, then it just grabs that critical hit rate and makes itself do more damage. I'm not 100% sure on the calculation there, whether it just grabs the chance and just plops it on top of the critical hit damage that I already have, or whether it like goes through some sort of calculation before or after. But it means that crit make guaranteed crits better and only better. And if you have a guaranteed critical hit attack, it makes the critical hit stat even better because you can actually guarantee them. This actually a very interesting situation used to be the case for Warrior before this rework or this change. And if you've ever met a Warrior who melts Tenacity instead of Direct Hit, or they will melt Determination and then Tenacity instead of Direct Hit. Either there's some like defensive argument that they're going with. Some people do that. But some of them will tell you that it's because it scales better on Warrior. This isn't true anymore. But it would not be the first or the last time that I or you see someone that does something in a specific way because in like 5 years ago, it worked like that. And they've just not like read up on it. Like to give a good example, Machinist was reworked in Shadowbringers such that Wildfire just does a potency based on the number of weapon skills you used. That's from Shadowbringers. In Stormblood, Wildfire just alright, guys, I'll see you. In Stormblood, Wildfire just like wrote down all of the damage you were doing. And then just when the timer ended, it went and did damage as a percentage of the damage you just did. So that meant that it actually scaled with all damage. Like, in the second rate tier of Shadowbringers, I met someone who generally seemed knowledgeable on the game, but was very specific that they were 100% confident that Wildfire scaled with all damage you did. Which was a very funny conversation, because it ended when I said, have you tried reading the tooltip recently? And the funny thing is that this thing with crit and direct hit scaling with the rate is in all of the tooltips that have this feature. Like, it says so on all of them. Like, it says here on Inner Release. It says so here on Inner Chaos. It says here on Chaotic Cyclone. It says here on Primal Rend. It says it here on Reassemble. So anything that has a guaranteed crit or direct hit, it will also say that it works like that. So, like, if you ever end in that argument, just go, have you read your tooltips recently? But the reason why Warriors did that is because basically all of the actually good buttons on the Warrior rotation, like the most impactful buttons, were guaranteed to direct hit anyway, which meant that direct hit stat did nothing in the part of the rotation that Warriors actually cared about. Like, they just didn't really do anything. So what you would do is, instead of going, I can use direct hit to make my weaker attacks better, I could just get tenacity and make my good damage better. And a very interesting side note to that is that if you have no direct hit materia on your gear as a warrior, then technically you have a 0% chance to direct hit. Like, actual 0. So it was pretty common at one point for a lot of warriors to bring just one direct hit materia, and the reason was that one direct hit materia gave you like a few percent, like I think it was like 1% direct hit chance, and the first 1% is the most impactful because it means you go from not being able to direct hit to being able to direct hit. And if you're really lucky, like we're talking like godlike luck here, like actually like unreal luck, you could direct hit all attacks in an entire fight with just 1% direct hit. You could do that. It's not going to happen, but it could happen. Like, there is a non-zero chance that if you use 100 attacks, that all 100 you roll a 1 on a 100-sided die. Like, they all have the chance. It's just that the chance is like, well, we'll probably need scientific notation to write it. So a lot of warriors would grab just one directed materia because it might give them a damage gain. But some people in Endwalker or late Shadowbringers sat down and actually calculated it and was like, no, listen, so you can choose to have 1% direct hit, or you can choose to have, you know, this stat put into tenacity instead. The damage you gain on tenacity, on average, is the same as the average damage you will get from directed. That's how bad directed was for Warrior, by the way. Because of the sheer amount of damage Warriors did that was guaranteed to direct hit actually scaled worse than tenacity, point for point, for Warrior. So it's like, you can choose to just have all your damage do slightly more, or you can choose to have the insignificant part of it maybe sometimes on a once in a blue moon do more damage. And then everyone went over and never stopped using direct hit pretty much. Except those that didn't read that description explanation and just went, no, that's not how it works. I like to have 1% direct hit. Meh. As Sertle said. long timers who don't read patch notes, doing things the way they always have. You know, I think it would be very interesting to see, like, someone from Heavensward or Stormblood come back to the game, like a tank main, and be like, I'm not using that. Where did they put my DPS stats? I need that one. Where's Deliverance? Cecil also says, I don't think they've specified, but yeah, that's why Tenacity is useless on Warrior now. Yeah, exactly. The thing is, when they made it so directed scales good for Warriors, they just went, like, with Tenacity and were like, I don't want to play with you anymore. Just, meh. Little Billy says, I knew a guy who knew everything about Dark Knight, except he held on to the idea that Carve and Spit build blood if used under Blood Weapon till the Endwalker changes. How did the Blood Weapon used to work? Okay. In Stormblood, it worked like that. So I have found a note here that says Stormblood release, recast time changed from 60 seconds to 4. How about I just grab it here? Look, whoops. It's Gamer Escape. We have it here. Stormblood release. Recast time reduced from 60 to 40 seconds. The effect increases attack speed by 10%, has been changed to reduce weapon skill cast time and recast time, spell cast time and recast time, and auto attack delay by 10%. The blood gauge will now increase by 3 each time a physical attack lands. This is also important because the blood gauge was added in Stormblood. So that means that Carve and Spit based on its description should give you 9. The problem is that Carve and Spit has, as far as I know, always produced 1 and only 1 damage number, which means that the 3-fold attack hit is completely irrelevant. It's just aesthetic. It doesn't hit 3 times. Do you know how it looks if an attack hits 3 times? It looks like this. And I played Dark Knight and Stormblood. I'm pretty sure it didn't hit 3 times. But it's very easy to forget how exactly things were. I had, like, an interesting example is that I've had someone claim that Bard had a cast time on all of their songs in all of Heavensward. But it was actually in Heavensward they reworked it so that, well, actually they did have cast times, but this person claimed that it was 3 seconds. It was actually buffed to 1.5 seconds in Heavensward. That was, by the way, also the patch where they made Warden's Paean an ability. But yeah, like, Blood Weapon used to be very interesting. Also, something that is very interesting about this, this is actually a buff. I just want to point out, this is technically a buff, even though it sounds like it's just semantics. Increasing your attack speed by 10% is a 9.1% GCD reduction. 9.1%. Whereas actually literally reducing it by 10% is 10%. And the reason for that is that going from 100% attack speed to 110% attack speed is the same as dividing your GCD by 1.1. And this is the same as multiplying your GCD by 0.9, which is slightly better. Turtle says, have you read the tooltip? Might be the yeah, exactly. That is a really good response and really funny if they haven't. The sad part is that sometimes what'll happen is that they say, yes, I have. And if then you have to, like, follow it up with, can you recite it to me? Can you just tell me what it does? Word for word. Because they might just say they have, because they did read the tooltip 5 years ago. Phil says, if you invert my luck from yesterday, you could probably get a few in a row. Yeah, true, with 1% directed. There's also the part that, yeah, with Little Billy saying, the luck of a reality-shaping being playing MMOs with save states. And Tina says, side weird things on description of action. I saw that Dragoon does say what it is the previous action and combo is, even though some of the actions can be triggered in another way. Huh? I'm guessing you mean these? That is actually a very interesting point. There's 2 ways to get Fang and Claw bad, and 2 ways to get Wheel in Motion. But I feel like there's a good reason why they did it like that. So, allows for immediate execution of Wheeling Thrust after landing Fang and Claw, or Fang and Claw after landing Wheeling Thrust, increasing potency by 100. That isn't on the tooltip. Like, it is not there at all. I think the reason is because if they had to explain that, it would have to be can only be executed while under the effect of Fang and Claw bad, granted by Heaven's Thrust, or by Wheeling Thrust after using Chaotic Spring. Also, it does 100% more potency, and suddenly you're looking at a tooltip that looks like this. I understand why they didn't do it like that. Speaking of which, if I remember correctly, well, they do say that they combo from Confiteor. If I remember correctly, yeah, there's no trait that explains how these blades appear. It's just, if you just, like, don't check your traits or spells, you just reach level 90, use Confiteor, and suddenly it turns into Blade of Faith. Like, there's no explanation of why this is. It's just that Confiteor turns into Blade of Faith because you have Blade of Faith, not because some trait says so. It's pretty funny. That's just another example. Gilano says, sometimes when I engage a boss, I still have a part of me thinking, wait, I didn't put Protect on everyone yet. Yeah. How about Stone Skin? Settle says, I've had people tell me off in dungeons for using Provoke to do long-range pulls because it only puts you at the top of the aggro list, but it has a lot of... But exactly, it has a lot stronger effect on enmity now. I actually talked about that earlier in this stream because I had a comment on my 6 tips for tanking video where, among other things, I demonstrate this way to pull. And in that demonstration, I included that Provoke does a ridiculous, like, metric ton of enmity. And this comment went, first of all, I don't recommend doing that because I think running up to the mobs or using a gap close and then using an AoE attack is better. Which was also a method that I suggested with more mobs. And then they also added, I'm also pretty sure that Provoke only does 1 enmity unless they changed it. I'm sitting there like, yes, they changed it. Did you watch the video? I've seen that one a lot of times, actually, Sertle. A lot of times. Also, hey Orion, I hope you're doing well. And that is correct, Phil. Back in the day, the way Carbon Spit worked was that the restores MP thing only happened if you weren't using your signature effect Dark Arts. But because it was the attack that scaled the best with Dark Arts in your entire toolkit, like it added like, if I remember correctly, it did 100 potency and restored MP if you used it like just raw. If you used it with Dark Arts, it did 450 potency, if I remember correctly. And most of your things that could spend Dark Arts just gained, like, I believe it was 140 potency? I'm pretty sure it was 140. So Carbon Spit getting 350, like, it's pretty good. And also, you're right, Phil. The tooltip actually still says that it hits threefold. But what they're talking about when they're saying threefold, they mean they mean this 1, 2, 3. But I can understand the confusion. Because Dream Within a Dream actually also says deliver a threefold attack. The thing is that the extremely specific word choice here is that Carbon Spit says delivers a threefold attack with a potency of 510. Dream Within a Dream says delivers a threefold attack each hit with a potency of 150. So like they're actually clarifying that there's 3 hits here, where Carbon Spit didn't say that. Kind of funny. And Little Billy says, fun story, I unlocked Paladin in Stormblood, but never fully maxed it, but just kinda hit the old bar with lots of dead buttons when I got back into it early Endwalker. Well, early Endwalker, Paladin was reworked in 6.3, right? I'm pretty sure it was 6.3. It's not actually that long ago. The patch notes for the Paladin rework were a lot to read through. I missed the bit about Bulwark returning until I went in that day to edit my UI and saw a button on a hidden bar was actually functional. I had that too, because like I actually went and took off my soul crystal to check something because I was making a guide, and I actually had Bulwark on my hidden third bar, and suddenly it stopped having like the this action is no longer available icon and had Bulwark on it. It just said you can't use this because you're not a paladin. And Tila says it's more about the fact that saying which previous action it is, unlike other jobs where they either say nothing or something prepared, which aside from the Dragoon trait, other actions also say which previous action it is. That is true. It is just pretty funny that they have this, like, split. Saint Chief says, so when does the current Savage raid tier open up where you can get loot over and over again? That's not something that is always at a consistent time. Sometimes they do it in the point X5 patch, or the .x8 patch, as the others say, but usually it's like really late. The one time I specifically remember where it was like still early in the raid tier was in the second raid tier of Shadowbringers, because due to this worldwide phenomenon that was happening where everyone was staying at home, they had some problems getting the next major patch out on time. Shockingly. So we were stuck there for quite a long time. But yeah, something like that. Enjoy your PvP roulette, Intila. Yeah, I agree. They could probably perfectly fine open it up in the following major patch. I'm not sure why they don't. Not entirely sure why they don't. What's the daily? Oh boy, I'm sorry for you, Intila. Shatter. Shatter! I think it's like you can get like if you clear the current Savage raid tier week 1, you can probably have a full set of Savage gear genuinely within like 2 months, I'm pretty sure. It's like halfway through the patch it drops in. Little Billy says, I think it made a little more sense to keep it locked when there were more catch-up gear like Eureka and Bosha. I suppose. I don't know. It's complicated. I've talked about this, I think, mostly in comments, but the gearing of Final Fantasy XIV is a little strange, and there's... it's strange, is it not? And there's a... some things where the balance is complicated. Like... if you add an additional way to get like starter gear for the current raid tier, or you just didn't have a weekly lockout on like the current raid tier, for example, if you didn't have a lockout on that for the first many months, then it would have a severe impact on the value of crafted gear. Because if you can just farm gear like that, what's your motivation to buy crafted gear? And while there is other stuff to make as a crafter, and the crafted gear is usually better because you can overmeld it and stuff like that, it would still have a direct impact on the value of crafters. And it's like a very careful balance, because as it stands, crafted gear is already like mildly unhelpful, because you can, like, by now you could have a tombstone set. And you could easily have multiple normal raid sets. So casuals are less motivated to buy the crafted gear. But by now, the only buyers of crafted gear would be the casual players, because the Savage Raiders already have all their gear. Like, they have all the gear they need. And then in 6.5, you'll be able to augment the crafted gear to 650, which then makes the price go up again. But if you could easily get 650 gear, you would have no reason to buy it. So it puts like a very delicate balance here. So I don't know what would actually happen if they added more gearing options. I think it would be good if there were more gearing options. I'm still waiting for like more like Savage 4-man content, for example. I want more of that. And it would be extra cool if it like had gear drops. It doesn't have to be best in slot. Like, they could make Savage content and just have it like be 5 item levels lower than the Savage raid tier. They could like make Savage dungeons that drop, like in this raid tier, 655 gear. Or even just 650 gear would be helpful for some players in this raid tier. Like, when we don't have the Alliance raid and the upgrade tokens accessible casually and stuff yet. Like, it doesn't have to be super great. It just has to give something. Like, I think we talked about this before. But yeah, exactly, Eric Wilson. Criterion dungeons are so close. The only problem is that you don't have that much reason to do it more than like once or twice, I think. Exactly, Phil. Precisely. 655 would be a sweet spot where it's not the best gear in the game, but it would be an upgrade for some players, especially and specifically players that don't want to do Savage raids. Little Billy says, Zadnok gear was 525 when the Eden best in slot was 530. When did Zadnok come out? In the final patch. 555. And the final raid tier came out in 5.4. So by that point, we had already had 6 months or so. So like, it was really, really catch up at that point, right? I'm just saying, it's good. It's better than no options, but and we want to see options like that. But in 5.55 is like the final patch, or like maybe one, like there's maybe one minor patch left. Not saying that's a bad thing, but at that point, most people had already used the Alliance raid to get a full 530 Tombstone set. So that's why I don't remember using it at all, was because I looked and was like, this isn't better than what I have. But I think that Zadnar and Eureka were good additions. And it's a shame we don't have it this time, but I'm pretty sure the reason we don't have it this time is because in Stormblood, when Eureka was current, I remember people complaining about it and not liking it, right? People didn't like Eureka. Then Shadowbringers comes out. And Bosha comes out. And people complain about it and don't like it. In fact, they called it like worse Eureka, even though the difference between Bosha and Eureka is that Bosha had removed many of the things people complained about in Eureka. But that's because by the time Bosha came out, people had already forgotten that they didn't like Eureka, because the reason they didn't like Eureka was because Eureka gave you gear upgrades, which meant people felt obligated to do it, even if they didn't like it. Sound familiar? People getting angry that the current Savage Raid has a cool mount they want because they can't get it because they don't want a Savage Raid. That happened. That axolotl mount caused some grief for some players. So people didn't like Eureka because Eureka had gear upgrades for them, so they had to do it even if they didn't want to. Bosha comes out. There's gear upgrades there. So some players felt they had to do it, but now Eureka doesn't have gear upgrades anymore. So now you don't have to do it, so now people like doing it. So in Endwalker, we get variant and criterion dungeons. They're fun. There's no gear upgrades, so you don't have to do them. Slam dunk, right? Perfect. Problem solved. No one feels like they have to do them. So people complain that they don't have to do them. Like, what do you do at that point as a developer? What do you do? Like, they didn't have a Bosha or Eureka again probably because people hated it. So they went, okay, we clearly can't make that, so let's just not make that. And then people are mad that it isn't there. And the reason why the current optional content they add doesn't give any gear upgrades is because that was clearly the problem. And now the problem is that it isn't there. Like, you can't satisfy anyone. Like, the problem is that the average MMO gamer will not do content if there is no reward. But if there is a reward, but they don't like the content, they will still do the content. They will just not be happy about it. Case in point, I'm pretty confident that spamming P1 for mock tomes has gotten extremely stale by now. But I'm also pretty confident there's a lot of players still doing it. Wouldn't it have been an incredible timing if I had opened the party finder and there was a group for it? There isn't, but man, that would have been good. That would have been so funny. Ryan says, I haven't done anything to farm mock tomes yet, apart from the Kai stream last week. There were 2 groups about 20 minutes ago. Well, my joke was 20 minutes too late. Yeah, Ryan, there's no requirement to farm it. There's like the framer kit and the fat cat parasol are like the special things. Everything else you can get from other sources. Sertal says, I kind of alternated between that and doing other stuff. My tactic was queue up for all the last raids from each expansion, then grind P1. That's pretty smart. And the thing is to do it in a way that doesn't bore you. Right. Oh, nice, Orion. So you're almost like at a point where you can automate your island. I'm starting to make some money. Anyway, I queued up the stuff for this week, and now I have a huge list of stuff the workshop still needs. Oh. Yeah. Then you might have to farm a lot. I farm a little bit every few days. Yeah. I think this was a great stream. I think we learned a lot. We had a lot of interesting discussions. But I can both feel that, if I was to continue, I have to turn on some light. You can see my camera's basically switching to the night vision mode. And also, my voice is like giving out a little bit now. The only thing missing is that the camera just like switches to like the green like night vision goggles like look like. Yeah, if you enjoyed the stream, remember that don't leave. Wait. I have things I want to tell you. The YouTube channel has a Discord community server you can join where you can find many of the wonderful people here. Apparently you can't find Sertal, as far as I know, but you can find Orion and Fel and Gelano. What you will also find there is the weekly schedule where I tell what's happening throughout a week. It's usually 1 week at a time. And you can also find the announcement channel where I put an announcement whenever there's a stream planned, a video coming out, or whatever it is, and it's usually there you will see it first. You can also sign up to get tagged whenever I post something. Also, by the way, Sertal, I'm not saying it to like single you out. It was just that I think it's interesting, funny that you've been like participating in the channel for so long, but you're not there. You don't have to be. It's optional. It was just a joke. It's just a joke. You can also sign up to be tagged whenever there's something new by choosing the reminder role. Optional. I don't tag outside of that typically. So we will not get spammed with like notifications. Yeah. So consider that. Also, if you did in fact enjoy the stream, I would appreciate it very much if you liked the stream, like in YouTube lingo, because that helps me a lot. That tells YouTube that it was a good stream. And helps my channel very much. So thank you so much in advance. Yeah. The next few days we have a video coming out about Wondrous Tales. It's a lot of probability calculations. If you've ever thought, is it worth it to get 3 lines? That might be a video for you. And we have we have more Mock-Tome farming on Thursday on stream, where we might try to be a little bit more efficient about it. And then on Friday, we're talking item level. This was something we talked a little bit about earlier in the stream, I think. How item level can sometimes be a problem. If the stats are bad on the gear piece. Might also have been some other stream I talked about that. I feel like I talk about that a lot. And then Sunday, we do the side questing stream with Small Kai. So, I hope you look forward to some of that content. And otherwise, I'll see you eventually, hopefully. So, good night, good morning, afternoon or evening, depending on where you are in the world. And I hope to see you all very soon. Bye-bye!